Okay, good evening. The time is now 7 p.m. and we want to start the City of Urbana Council's Committee of the Whole. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Next up is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, April 23rd, 2018. Is there a motion?
So moved. I'll second.
So that's moved by Councilman Brown, second by Councilman Miller, or was that Dean?
I second it. My motion is second.
So motioned by Councilman Miller and second by Alderman Hazen. I will get this Alderman council person right here in just a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Is there any public input? I have one card from Deb Busey, who would like to speak at the time of the item on the agenda. Are there any other cards? All right, seeing none. We'll move on to presentations. Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, CIT recognition, PD.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Claudia Lenhoff, and I'm the Executive Director of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. And I wanted to come here this evening to present our Harry J. Baker Community Service Award to Urbana Police Department for the work of the CIT officers. Do you need to introduce yourself?
I'm Joel Sanders with Urbana Police. I'm the coordinator of our CIT program.
On Friday, April 13th, the Healthcare Consumers held our annual awards dinner, and at that meeting, we recognized the work of CIT officers in the various jurisdictions in Champaign County. And unfortunately, nobody from Urbana Police Department was able to attend, so I wanted to come here to deliver the award. So I'd like to just read parts of the award presentation now. Over the last few years, our organization has been working as a stakeholder partner in some important work dealing with reentry services in our community and with the justice and mental health collaboration. And reentry services refer to the services available to people who are returning to the community following an incarceration. Both of these efforts brought us together with law enforcement, mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse treatment providers, other social service providers, local government, and advocacy organizations. And both of those efforts have goals that overlap. Generally speaking, these community collaborations seek to reduce recidivism and to reduce the number and length of incarcerations of individuals with mental and behavioral health needs. As we began to look at the resources we had in the community, including CIT, jail-based services, and community providers, I was reminded of something Mr. Rogers said. He often spoke to kids with messages that we need to hear as adults. When you feel overwhelmed by a tragedy, quote, look for the helpers. Find those who are trying to help. This award is well deserved. Every officer who has made a commitment to receive crisis intervention team training and the leadership supporting their efforts have earned our gratitude. They are the helpers. Most people in our community do not know about these crisis intervention team services provided by law enforcement officers. CIT officers respond to behavioral health crisis calls. People's lives are messy, and this can be really hard work. The people here, Joel here and his team, to receive this award understand that. They bring to their work an ethic of caring and a commitment to help improve people's lives while serving the public's safety. We believe in the no wrong door approach for people who need mental health and substance abuse treatment services to be able to find their way to the care they need. And because mental illness and disease of addiction carry stigma and often shame, a community can have no wrong door to ask for help. No door that does not provide a compassionate response and linkage to care. Persons struggling with mental illnesses are seen in the criminal justice system at disproportionate rates. While persons with mental illness are no more likely to be violent than the general population, We all know law enforcement interactions can end tragically for the person with mental illness, for bystanders and family, and for the responding officer. In Champaign County, we are fortunate to have a coordinated effort among law enforcement jurisdictions to respond to persons with behavioral health problems. More than 100 law enforcement and corrections officers have participated in crisis intervention team training. This is not something that they are required to do. This is something they have chosen to do in order to better serve their community. CIT training is a 5-day course for law enforcement and correction officers covering such issues as signs and symptoms of mental illness, substance abuse and co-occurring disorders, autism and intellectual disabilities, psychotropic medications, post-traumatic stress response, as well as issues faced by the elderly, returning veterans, children, and adolescents. The training includes de-escalation strategies to respond effectively to persons experiencing a mental health crisis and introduction to local treatment resources. The sheriffs and the chiefs of police in Urbana, Champaign, Rantoul, and the University of Illinois all support CIT training for officers. A cross-jurisdictional agreement ensures that a CIT-trained officer is available to respond at all times in the county. A dispatcher can request a CIT officer, or the 911 caller can make the request. In Champaign County, there are about 150 calls each month for a CIT-trained officer. Often these calls take longer and require more assessment and problem solving. The most frequent calls are those related to suicide attempts or suicidal ideation. There is no doubt that the commitment of these officers and the training they have received has saved lives, prevented unnecessary incarcerations, and provided linkage to community services for thousands of individuals and families in Champaign County. A law enforcement or corrections officer cannot say, this is someone else's job. Whatever the problem or situation, they have to find a way to deal with it and deal with it using community resources available. They need our help, and we owe it to these officers to ensure that when they respond to someone with behavioral health needs, that the community stands behind them with the health, behavioral health, housing, and advocacy services needed to meet the needs. What I have learned from working in these collaborations and also through personal experience when I myself have had to call for CIT with clients is that the officers who do the CIT work are the front line, on the street, mental health first responders. They are an essential but almost invisible part of the fabric of our mental health system in this community. It is my privilege, therefore, to present you with Healthcare Consumers Harry J. Baker Community Service Award to the Urbana Police Department for CIT officer services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Joel, for all the work that you're doing as well. All right. Next on the agenda is the staff report, but first we have a proclamation from the mayor.
I'm going to stay here this time. Okay. This continues our tradition of recognizing building safety. Whereas, this is a proclamation, whereas the City of Urbana is committed to recognizing our growth and strength depends on the safety and economic value of the homes, buildings, and infrastructure that serve our citizens, both in everyday life and times of natural disaster. And whereas our confidence in the structural integrity of these buildings that make up our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated members of the International Code Council, a U.S.-based organization that brings together local, state, and federal officials that are experts in the built environments to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we gather, grow, live, learn, work, worship, play. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our community's largely unknown guardians of public safety, our local code officials, who assure us of safe, efficient, and livable buildings. And whereas our community benefits economically and technologically from using the international codes that are developed by a national voluntary consensus codes and standards developing organization, our government is able to avoid the high cost and complexity of developing and maintaining these codes, which are the most widely adopted building safety and fire prevention codes in the nation. These modern building codes include safeguards to protect the public from natural disasters such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, floods, and earthquakes. And whereas, during Building Safety Month, we recognize and pay tribute to those who ensure the safety and resilience of our community buildings, and we reaffirm our commitment to upholding and abiding by strong and effective building safety standards. And whereas, the community is asked to consider their own commitment to improve building safety and the economic investment at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local building safety departments, fire prevention administrators, and countless others who are responsible for this important work on our behalf. Now, therefore, I, Diane Wolf Marlin, Mayor of the City of Urbana, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 as Building Safety Month in the city of Urbana, Illinois. And really, every month is Building Safety Month in our city, but this is where we officially recognize it. So thank you, John Schneider, and your staff for all that you do. Thank you.
All right, so during this staff report, are there other staff reports? Feel great.
Good evening. I wanted to report the, Cunningham Avenue between University Avenue and Interstate 74, a little further north of that, will be under construction starting tomorrow. And this is an IDOT project, and they've awarded the project to Open Road Paving, and they will start work tomorrow. There will be some lane closures. If you travel that way, north and southbound on Cunningham Avenue, you may anticipate some delays, particularly during the daytime working hours. This project is supposed to conclude this fall, they say November, weather permitting. What's involved will be new ADA ramps and some sidewalk work, some milling and resurfacing. There will also be, and you may recall, Council, earlier we agreed, had an agreement with IDOT to pay a proportion of a shared use path from Kenyon Road all the way up to Napleton Way to connect for folks by pedestrians and bicyclists on the east side there under 74. That's a big deal, costly path, if you will, but it's a big improvement for those folks. So just wanted to give you a heads up. You'll be seeing more orange signs and yellow vests and workers out on Cunningham in the weeks ahead. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other staff reports? All right, seeing none. All right, we're going to move on to ordinance number 2018-05-032, and ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 8, omnibus. Mayor, did you want to do something here, or you want to wait?
We'll wait till Elizabeth.
Okay, please, Elizabeth.
This is pretty straightforward. They're just a variety of, I guess what I classify as cleanup items. The first one is that we are going to reallocate some savings from a vacant engineer position to pay for engineering services, which our city code requires us to have the council approve any money that moves between personnel codes and any other type of expense code. So that does require council approval. That's $46,000. Also, a small reimbursement from the county for expenses related to the MLK celebration. We would budget that as an expense with an equal revenue offsetting. Then rolling forward some of the funds that are budgeted for physicals in the police department. We budget an equal amount each year, but they don't always occur in equal amounts each year. So we roll that forward normally because we know that they'll need it in a future year. And then recognizing both revenues and expenditures related to the SNAP Double Value Grant for the farmers market. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And later on the agenda, you will see a resolution that would accept that grant.
All right. Is there a motion? Mary Alice.
I would like to move that we move ordinance number 2018-05032, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, amendment number 8, with recommendation to approval to City Council.
Second.
So that's been moved by Alderman Wu, second by Alderman Jacobson. Any discussion? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I have an amendment. I understand we need to add $30,000 for legal services in the executive department, outside legal services. I assume that would be a hit on the fund balance.
Yes, yes, and yes, if you amend the ordinance, then I'll add that and include it in the packet for next
Okay,
week.
so I'd like to amend it to add that.
I'll second that.
I think the person who seconded the motion has to accept this friendly amendment. Is that-
It's just a regular amendment. We
It's
can
just
vote
a
on it
regular amendment?
first and then vote on the motion.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second, and then an amendment, and a second to the amendment.
Second.
Vote on the amendment first.
So let's vote on the amendment first. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. And on the motion to move the ordinance to council, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Next up is ordinance number 2018-05-033, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7 regarding schedule of fees, subsection A, liquor licenses, July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. Finance.
Hello. Is this on?
Hello.
It's on?
Just a second, I'm sorry, let me make sure.
It's on.
Yes, sir, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chair and fellow council members, because I know that they broke it up so that I could vote on all of the other fees with the exception of the liquor fees. After she's done giving her presentation, I just ask that if there is discussion about anything other than liquor license fees, that you guys hold off on that until the next section, because now I'm going to have to recuse myself from participating in the discussion on this particular ordinance number pursuant to the Illinois State Liquor Control Act of 1934. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, go ahead, Pat.
Okay. So this is the annual revision of the fee schedule, and the first ordinance is just to approve a proposed fee increase to liquor licenses. The only fee increase to liquor licenses being proposed this year would be a $70 increase to video gaming terminal licensing fees, and then some miscellaneous liquor license fees, and the removal of Bassett certification fee that we no longer do.
Is there a motion?
So I move that, I move passage of item subsection 1 to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
Charlie?
This item has to be put on file first and sent to
The June meeting.
council for the June meeting, so that should probably be reflected in the motion. Remember, we have to put the fee schedule
out?
Yeah, we would, so it has to be on file for 30 days. A notice gets published in the News Gazette. I'm sorry with the breakup.
Okay.
Wasn't sure when to give the spiel.
Yeah.
So it'll be posted down tomorrow, starting in the city clerk's office,
Okay.
as well as on the website for public input. So we do ask that no action taken tonight, just forward it to the June 18th council meeting.
Okay. I therefore revise my motion to send item 1 to City Council for consideration at its June meeting.
And I will therefore second that.
All right, so it's been moved by Alderman Jacobson, second by Alderman Hazen. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. This applies to, of course, all the changes, right? This is the 30-day post, so that we, just to make
Yes.
sure everybody's clear. All right, moving on to number 9, ordinance number 2018-05-034, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7 regarding schedule of fees, subsections B through P, fees excluding liquor, July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
Okay. So this is all the other license fees that staff has reviewed, and we are proposing increases for, including the liquor license proposal. We estimate around just under $200,000 in additional revenue for this coming fiscal year. About 18,000 of that would be in the general operating fund, and 180,000 in other funds. Sanitary, stormwater, recycling, motor vehicle parking systems. A large majority of the increases will reflect a 2.13% increase, and that will be to cover the related expenses for cost of living increase, longevity, and step increases. I would like to point out there are 2 changes. If you look at either the memo, and then I can also direct you to a page in the fee schedule, but on your memo, the first would be number 11 under right-of-way permits, where it says there's an increase in right-of-way work without a permit. We're actually going to keep that as admin fee, leave it as is with the proposed increase, the language. That is how the ordinance currently reads, so it's really just a language. And the other one would be number 12 underneath that for erosion control permits. We are going to strike increase erosion control permit minimum fee and just get rid of that entirely. They do not charge for that at all, so that should not even be in the fee schedule. So we'll remove that. That's 2 changes you do not see tonight that we will make sure is put on for tomorrow when it goes on file. Other than that, I will take any questions and try to answer those for you.
Any questions? Alderman Wu.
So as I look through some of these, it looks like there's quite a range in terms of the dates in which things were increased.
Yes.
Going back to, I think, 2003 is the zoning appeals board fee. So my question is this. Some of the fees seem very minimal. I know that we're trying to adhere to a 2.13 increase. But for example, in number 3, the food handling licenses, the proposed fee for a mobile dispenser license fee goes from $60 to $61. So my question is, it would seem to me like it would be a little bit easier if it was a little more staggered, or, you know, you already have some staggering between years in terms of increasing. So I'm wondering what the thought process was in terms of doing these little teeny-weensy
Well,
increases.
I mean, with a lot of the smaller fees, we did, you will see reflected in here larger increases, just so the fee looks like it's getting a bigger jump, or at least getting rounded to a whole number. Food handling permit, I mean, you don't want to increase it, I guess, too much, and I understand what you're saying, but over time, if we gradually increase these in a smaller amount, some of the feedback on the food handling one has been it's easier for the business owners to be able to afford it, and keep in mind that Champaign also has fees for the food handling, so trying not to go too much higher.
What is the relationship between Champaign and Urbana fees? Are they on par?
We're higher.
We're higher. And when you say higher, are we $1 higher? Are we $10 higher or $100 higher?
I would have to, I could look and get you back an answer on that. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't say exactly how high we are at this time. I didn't bring that part of the worksheet with me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? So, one of the questions that I have is in relationship to when did we really get into the meat of this discussion? I know we're going to forward it to the June meeting. Do we typically wait to try to get into the meat of that discussion then, or do we do that now? As far as each one of these, I mean, there may be an omnibus vote on it, but I think in past years we've broken out some of these because some council members did not want to vote in a vote yes for the entire package. There was some we wanted separated.
So, like last year, I mean, you can get into the meat of whatever on here you would like to discuss, and I know there were things that we removed last year from this, and that now would be the time to get into those discussions.
I would just say if you have significant questions or concerns that you want us to follow up on, it'd be better to know that now than to wait until June 18th, which is shortly before the start of the fiscal year.
With that said, does anyone have any particular questions or concerns? Councilman Jacobson.
So I'll just express a general concern in this. We are our own people, and we don't need to imitate what Champaign does, but we do need to be competitive with Champaign in restaurants, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it would be very helpful if we were provided with a comparison chart so that we could consider, I'm sure that staff actually has prepared this schedule with that in mind. But I think it would be, and so I fully anticipate that I fully anticipate saying, great, you covered all the bases with respect to that. But I think it would be very good to have that, to have that explicitly provided to us, so that it's an explicit part of the public record, and all of our citizens and all of our business, people who are doing business here would have that.
Yeah, we can certainly provide you with that. It is something when a worksheet goes around to different departments, when they're asked to review their fees, the comparison with Champaign is listed on that worksheet for them to, for it not to be the sole determination on an increase on whether or not they do increase, but to consider it.
Alderman Brown.
Yeah, as far as the parking fee, the parking meter increase, going from 25 cents to 50 cents, I understand that there will still be free parking after 5 every night and all weekend, right?
Yes, so parking in the downtown is 8 to 5, Monday through Friday only, so weekends and evenings are free. And I'd also just like to remind everyone that if the rate increase were to go, you can still park in the downtown or parking deck. Your hour 1 and your hour 2 is still 25 cents per hour for the first 2 hours and 50 cents for each additional hour after that.
Okay, thanks. And no change in the, I think, library doesn't start, or they stop enforcement at 4 o'clock?
We do, at the
Okay.
library. Yep.
Thanks.
Alderperson Wu.
So I realize that it's not on here, but Bill's comment made me think about the campus parking meters over there on Goodwin and Matthews and Nevada and so forth. Champaign has those meters enforced until 9, and we only have those meters enforced until 6. So since we're not, I'm just wondering if that's been considered to increase that to 75 cents. I mean, sorry, to increase the enforcement time.
No, but we can certainly look into it.
Okay, I think that might be beneficial. But not for downtown, just to be clear.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mayor Marlin.
Not a question, a couple of comments on the thought processes here. If you notice, many of the fees were not increased, especially the different classes of liquor licenses, and most of the fees related to building permits and construction and that sort of thing. We did very closely look at neighboring communities, and that's two areas that we wanted to try to stay on par with. We're still higher, but we wanted to not increase our fees anymore. As far as the downtown rates, it's important to note that the parking meter rate downtown have not been increased since 1986 for street parking, and 1991 for parking lots. And the reason behind the proposed rate increase is so that we can maintain our seasonal landscaping services in our downtown area. They're the people who plant the flowers, take care of the cutting grass, and really contribute to the quality and the appearance and attractiveness to our downtown. And in our era budget reductions this year, I decided, well, in conjunction with discussion with staff, that this would be a way for us to maintain those services. So. But as Bill pointed out, parking is still free after 5 on weekends, and first 2 hours in the parking garage are still 25 cents an hour. So it's a bargain.
Okay, I have about 4 different questions, and I'd like to give the chair to my distinguished colleague, Mr. Jacobson. Only if you'll call on me, though.
Mr. Ammons, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. So first, just some clarifying questions. Fire prevention permit, increase the non-hazardous and hazardous material facilities and fees. What exactly is that for? Maybe our new interim chief, no, he's not ready for that? All right. I don't know, I'm just wondering, what is that for? I
Well,
don't quite understand it.
I mean, I'm probably not the best person, but maybe better than you. I don't know. Sure, why not?
That's number 2. We can come back to that one if you
Yeah,
want.
maybe we could get you an answer. How about that? We'll get you an answer.
Oh, okay.
I can give it a shot on a real simple basis, just that the fees are different for businesses, higher for businesses that deal with hazardous materials. So if you,
That's a good shot at it. I'm
yeah,
just
I
trying to
mean, if
understand
you're
what-
running a business that doesn't have any hazardous materials, your risk of a fire is lower, and so your fire prevention permit is less
So
costly.
basically, if you have a business and that you could possibly start a fire, you have to pay a fee because you might start a fire? I'm
Well,
just trying to
all
understand.
businesses pay a fee. The question is, how much is the fee?
Okay.
And if there's a higher risk, then they pay a higher fee.
Okay, that's clear. That's clear enough for me. Thank you. The return check charge, number 8, increase the return check charge from $30 to $35. Is this for businesses or this for people, for
So
citizens?
we bank through Busey Bank, and NSF for a non-sufficient fund fee is currently $35. So we're just increasing it to the current rate. So we pass that on to someone who bounces a check.
To an individual who bounces? a check.
Yes, yes.
But it could also be a business.
It could, right.
I'm concerned that folks who, if they bounce a $30 check, will bounce a check, it's probably because they don't have $5 extra
It's the amount we get
to-
charged. The city gets charged the NSF fee. So
Okay.
we just pass that back on
All right, okay.
when we try to
That's-
collect.
I understand better, thank you.
Okay.
The live scan printing, increase the live scan printing, and this sort of speaks to Alderperson Wu's point about raising it from $42 to $43. I know in dealing with the expungement process or the expungement clinic that we're doing on a yearly basis, that I believe this is a fee that we waive. Chief Morgan, is that correct? We have in the past, yes. We haven't. You don't think we're going to continue? No, we'll talk about that later, I guess. All right. But to increase it for $1, again, this is going to be on a population of people that are just, already.
And I understand, and the suggestion is the 2.13% because it does take a personnel. Somebody has to do it, and, more than likely that person's getting a 2.13% increase.
From $42 to $43 doesn't seem like much, but for it to be $40 in the first place is where the problem comes in when we're working with this population of people who are trying to, go through this process of getting expungement, getting their life turned around and stuff. this is a major obstacle. So increasing that fee at all, to me, doesn't seem like, and it's going to bring us what, how much, the extra dollar that we're charging?
It's, so it's not listed, so it'd be under $500.
And the last thing for me is the vehicle towing and immobilization. This is, in my opinion, just one of the major issues that I've heard over and over again. I wouldn't say it's my opinion. I've heard this over and over again. And I want my council members to also understand this, that this fee of having your $250 after your car is impounded if you get stopped. Some people get stopped for minor offenses and they don't have anyone to come and to pick up the vehicle or something like that. And to now take this fee, the $250 is already too much, in my opinion. To see something like that increase, I'm not supportive.
So if I
of
could
that.
explain this vehicle immobilization fee as opposed to someone for a minor offense getting their vehicle towed, this is different. This is for 5 specific offenses.
Okay.
This would be driving under the influence of alcohol, drugs, methamphetamine, driving on a suspended license. No, I can get you the other 3. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, but it's more than just being pulled over for not having a seatbelt on or something else. So, and I would also say there is an administrative appeals process. If we do review those. If someone appeals, they have 10 days to appeal that. A lot of times they've renewed, they have current insurance, but the Secretary of State has been behind on getting that on their system, and it's, police officer pulls somebody over, it comes up on their system that it's still an insurance violation. If they bring back in proof from the Secretary of State stating that they had the insurance, we will waive that, and we have paid the tow fees and the storage fees as well. So that's in place.
So I appreciate that. Thank you for that clarification. I still believe that this is a problematic situation because you're still talking about a significant amount of money that any particular individual, if they have a suspended license or whatever the situation may be, I don't think people should drive under the influence. I'm not trying to advocate for that. But it just compounds many of these situations because the $250 doesn't get paid. What happens is the car sits there and it becomes $500 or it becomes $1,500 and individuals lose their vehicles. And I don't think that's a benefit for us in the community overall. So why is it $250?
Well, the fee's $250. That's what the city of Champaign charges. I believe they started it first. They have many more, if I was remembering, unless they've changed their ordinance, than 5 violations when this initially took effect. I think in July of 2010 is when council
And listen, I know that we're...
So that's why we set it at $250.
And I know that you're just sharing information. So,
Yeah.
And just because Champaign does something, as my colleague said, doesn't mean that we ought to do it. And this is just a regressive tax in many forms to a poor community who's going to have, as we know, who has the most interactions with the police department in both cities. So to me, it becomes a very intrusive way and form of getting money out of already very poor population of folks. So I do not agree with this. I don't think we should be charging $250, especially just because Champaign does it. So I would not be supportive of this, and I hope my colleagues will also take heed with that. With that, I'm finished. So I'll take the
Okay.
chair back.
Yes, please, Mr. Ammons, happily relinquish the chair to you.
Thank you. Alderman Hazen and then Alderman Miller.
Thank you. See if I can remember this right. What I remember it being maybe is drugs, suspended license plate, revoked, or DUI. Does that sound right? And maybe one more. But it's not suspended driver's license.
Not suspended driver's license, revoked driver's license.
So revoked driver's license, a suspended license plate, registration, DUI, a certain amount of drugs. I don't remember the 5th one. But my question is, and you might be a little shocked, Aaron, I don't particularly like this ordinance either. My question is, what is the daily rent to leave a car there for storage, and how does that compare to, say, like Tapman's or Reynolds or someplace else?
The relocators required to file their fees with us each year when they register as a relocator. The fees are kept in the city clerk's office. I could give you that information.
It was just, I mean, what's our daily rent for storage if we,
I'm guessing around $100
okay,
would be my guess for someone to get their vehicle. So that's a guess
per day for storage?
per day.
Chief Morgan?
We don't store vehicles. These vehicles are towed by whatever tow agency
Right.
tows them. We don't, we have the
Oh.
fee that is paid, but we don't charge that. That's all charged through the
Oh,
the
that's right.
towing company.
That's right, it sits in their private place.
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
You done?
Yeah, thank you.
Alderman Miller and then Brown.
So I was going to also bring this up, Chairperson Ammons, because, yeah, one, it struck me that it was $250, because that's exactly what it costs when your car gets towed. I know it's happened to me. And for a lot of people, that can hurt. And in light of some of the things we've done in the past and the minimal increase to our revenue of only $550, which means we only expect this to happen once or twice a year, there's no reason for us to have it on there. I don't think I need to go any further detail. I think Aaron explained it pretty well. But at $550, you know, if it saves one or two people who may have already committed an offense and done something wrong, but, you know, on the path to recovery and on the path to, you know, trying to get their life straight again, if it makes a big difference for them and it's not a big deal for us, I don't know why we would have to have it. So I don't think I would support pushing forward this particular ordinance with the set of fees with this particular fee in there.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, so the police ordered tow is $30, relocator tow is $30. Is there extra work that we have to do in a vehicle impoundment situation? Why is it so much higher than just, I mean, the police ordered tow, officer probably has to stay with the vehicle until the tow company comes.
Right,
so
that's
it's
correct.
$30.
Yeah.
What do we have to do in the case of a vehicle impoundment?
Well, a vehicle impoundment for the $250 seizure, well, the officer would also have to stay there till the tow company. The person's probably also going to jail, is my assumption, if you're issuing one of those. So, someone's being arrested, and then the paperwork comes back and it gets routed through staff, and staff does the administrative process and then the collection process on it.
So basically the same.
Yeah, and I would say, and these are just proposals, so whatever council decides to do, staff's just putting it before you. But I do recall a few years ago, the legal division did help us with an analysis on this fee, because you can't charge more than what the cost that it takes staff, police department, finance, to process it legal, their time spent on it. And we weren't charging more than what it cost. And I think at the time, 2 years ago, I think $275 was the threshold, so.
And then I think what you said was the increased revenue from this particular fee would be less than 500 because it didn't show up on your list, but the increase itself is $5 per incident. Do we know how many incidents there are in a year?
Well, 550 divided by 5.
Oh, so it was 550.
This
for
one
that.
was, I think it was the different one that he was asking on
That was less
before.
than 500.
Right.
So there was 101, basically, 101
Right.
incidents. So the total revenue loss, if you took away the fee completely, would be,
It's estimated at $550 for the year, for fiscal year 19. So
For
it's a
the increase?
$5.
that's
it's
for the
just a-
$5 per
It's just a
incident?
$5 increase from 250 to 255, and we're estimating revenue at $550.
So that's 101, or 110.
110. So
So,
annually
but
that
if
we
we-
process and
But
collect
if we
on.
reduce the fee by $200, you'd multiply that by 110 to
Okay.
see.
Are we reducing the fee? I'm sorry. Like,
We're just
I don't know where we're
discussing it
We're in
right
going.
now.
discussion, so, but I mean,
Let's
it
just-
sounded to me like there was a suggestion to eliminate or reduce the fee.
It would be 24,000.
So that'd be $24,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I missed that, I'm sorry.
24.
I saw a hand, Alderperson Wu.
So what I'm hearing you say, because I think that the city needs to be mindful of the burden that we put on the public, and really, we can't be charging fees unless it's a cost to the city to provide the service. So, for example, the fire department has to go through and do the permits, and that's a cost.
And the inspections.
And the inspections, et
Right.
cetera.
Yeah.
And I think that, I guess the big question then is, if we kept it at $250, which I would love to be able to lower it if it didn't cost the city anything, but that is an estimate of, what, $25,000 that we spend in staff time and fees, roughly speaking, if we have 100 cars that are taken a year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so that, is that increasing based on the fact that we increase, staff's costs increase every year? Is it 2%? So that's the rationale behind
Yes.
increasing it to 255?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that we could also, because we set the parameters, or let me ask, who sets the parameters for the 5 reasons why a car would be impounded? Is that? Good question. I thought that was our job.
I believe it was. It was all passed through council, and I believe those were the 5. And these are not just everyday occurrences, obviously 110 a year, but they are driving revoked, which is much worse than driving suspended, the driving under the influence, felony amounts of controlled substance, and fleeing and eluding the police, and also a suspension, cancellation, or revocation of your driver's license plate, usually due to like mandatory insurance. So if you don't have insurance and you've gotten in an accident and then you have some sort of a claim against you, they'll suspend your driving or your license plate registration as well. So I think that was when, at the time when it was discussed, it was narrowly defined as those 5 much more serious offenses that, as a way of narrowing the scope. It's certainly not everybody that gets their vehicle towed. It's just those narrow definition of those
And I
crimes.
certainly appreciate any attempt to try to narrow the situation. Even with the things that you've described, it makes sense to me if the vehicle is used in a reckless manner or something like that. There's some thought process that says, okay, we need to get this vehicle away from this person or get it off the street. But in many of the instances that we describe, I don't understand why we couldn't just, if no one shows up, let's say, for instance, there was one of these 5 reasons a person has a DUI. I certainly have heard of other situations where other citizens were involved who may be a little more prominent in the community. When they get a DUI, the police wait for someone to come and get the vehicle and allow them to take the car home. So there's some discretion. It's not mandatory that just because a person has a DUI or a certain amount of controlled substance or revoked license that the car be towed. The car really has little to nothing to do with the issue itself. It's just another burden on the person it's going to be a burden on the city. So if it was, for instance, if it took 30 minutes for a loved one to come and get the vehicle and take it home who had legitimate license and stuff, that still seemed to be more prudent and more valuable, I think, to us as a city, as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to charge you $250 and a bunch of time and energy and paperwork for our officers to go through. So I think that we should consider, as council, we should consider looking at this to see how we could curtail it, and then we don't have to worry about using it as a way to generate revenue for the city, to add that extra burden on individuals who've gotten stopped. Alderman Miller.
Yeah, so I guess I'll reiterate. I guess I wasn't thinking it was 110 stops at $250 a pop. So I'm not trying to say we should scrap $24,000 out of the budget. So let me be clear about that. I think it is good to discuss a reduction if it's at all possible or affordable. I'd like to get into a little bit more of that, Elizabeth. But one question I had, and maybe you can ask this, Chief Morgan. So if you're in one of these 5 situations, and you lose your vehicle, how does the $250 fine come to you?
It is paid through the finance department.
Okay, so it's
They
like
come
it's part of
here.
the ticket they're issued or something.
They have to come here to get a release form for their vehicle, and they have to pay the $250 fine. They then get a release form for the vehicle, and then they go to the tow company and pick up the vehicle.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, they're not also going to show up at Tadman's, and Tadman's is also going to say, you also owe us $250.
No.
This is like in lieu of that charge.
Well, the tow company has a towing fee that is separate from this impoundment fee.
Does it come back to the city?
There is a portion of the towing fee, is it $30 now?
There's a $30 fee that comes back to the city. For all private and
All tows,
city
yes.
tows. All tows.
Okay, so the towing company keeps $220 of it?
No, so the $250 administrative fee for the vehicle impoundment and seizure is a fee that's collected directly here at the city of Urbana. So
Okay.
if they come during the day, they would come to the finance department, they would pay their $250 fee. We would give them a form that they would take over to the police department, and the police department would give them the release form to go to the relocator to reclaim their vehicle. At the relocator, they would pay
They just
any
give them that
towing
form.
and storage charges.
Oh, they would pay towing and storage charges?
I mean, I'm saying that together, but I just think it's like.
Just storage.
their
If they come
fees.
the very next day, there's no storage fee, it's just
Right.
the tow fee. And then, but if, you could be stopped, say, or your car gets towed because you're in an accident, and it gets towed to there's a tow fee associated with that. That's what everybody pays.
Right,
Only the people with those 5 offenses that get cited for the impoundment fee would pay the $250 in addition, and that's paid here at the city.
Okay, so Tadman could still charge their own towing fee
Yes. Yes.
outside of this fee?
They
Yes.
do, yes.
They do.
They do.
Yes.
Okay. So the fee is to pay for, is a justification of our staff time? Correct? That's why
Yes.
we're charging $250?
Yes.
It's all for staff time? I mean, I guess, Elizabeth, you kind of said we can't profit from it, and this is where we've come to
Yeah,
say
and-
that this is how much it relatively costs us?
I mean, I think we've had this fee for many years, long before I've been here, but I can say that I've done the analysis on the similar fee in another local government in the area, and I think that amount is completely justified by the staff time that's involved. I mean, that tow has to be tracked. There's a lot of paperwork that goes through the finance department, through the police department. When people's car gets towed, they're calling the city. And so if we don't track those things every step of the way and let them know where their car is, then, that they could call around all the tow companies in town and try to find it. But that's something that every city, I think, in Illinois does.
Okay, I'm sure there's some other thoughts. Thanks.
Any other thoughts, council members? Alderperson Wu.
I think based on this conversation, I would be comfortable with keeping it at $250 for this year. I mean, that's a lot of money in the first place, but I would like to, I don't know. We don't have a motion on the floor right now, so I would propose that amendment if we do have a motion on the floor. I think that's the right.
Well, there's been a lot of
Order?
discussion without a motion, so,
Oh, okay. Well, I can make the motion with the amendment then. I move approval for, let's see here, are we on 035 right now? No, 034. So ordinance number 2018-05, 034, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7, regarding schedule of fees, subsections B through P, fees excluding liquor. With the change of keeping, let me make sure I have it right here. Number 25, the vehicle towing and immobilization, keeping that at $250 instead of increasing it to $255.
I'll second that.
so it's been moved by Alderperson Wu, second by Alderperson Hazen. Is there any further discussion? Hearing, and this will be moved to the June 19th meeting.
18th.
18th meeting, so that we would have the 30-day
Correct.
requirements.
Yes.
I do want to say in my final comment on this is that what comes out of these types of discussions for us as council members and for the public is that it sounds like it's $250 or maybe $255, but the reality is that there's a tow fee, and if you don't come the very next day, now you got a storage fee, and this is not going to impact the more wealthy folks in our communities who find themselves in these particular situations. They're going to pay that fee or that fine, and then they're going to move on. But the individuals who find themselves in these situations, and it's a violation of the law, right? I understand that. But as we consider these particular things, to say that we're going to, on our own, impose $250 that we don't really have to impose. I don't think there was an analysis or a study that was done that said our officers spend a total of 500 hours a year standing on the side of the road waiting for loved ones to come. That was done? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there was, I mean, Elizabeth said that there was such a study.
No, what she said was that there was a justification and an analysis of the staff time when you do collect those particular fees, is what I heard you say. So maybe I'm wrong.
So I don't recall personally doing that work here, but typically that's how user fees are established. A user fee has to have a rational relationship to the cost of providing the service.
Okay.
And so
And so in
I believe
relationship
that
to
is, I mean,
you said that there was a study or that was done in Champaign. And what Beth just said to us earlier was that we decided to do $250 because Champaign did.
No,
right?
I didn't. I mean, I
maybe
said
I'm
it
wrong. I
like
don't know.
that, but what I said, you asked me how we came about a $250 fee. How did we decide on $250? Well, when this fee was being presented to council, which if I'm trying to remember right, I think it might have been the former chief of staff that presented that. I'd have to go back and look at a memo of where that came from. But you know, the 250 fee, the amount that was decided on was after, you know, Champaign had released theirs. We looked at ours and said this seems like a reasonable fee to charge to start a starting place.
All right, I'm going to leave it alone for now. Alderperson Miller.
I just had one last question. Chief, maybe you can answer this. I don't know if anybody can. So the next, I'm just curious, on the next day, storage and overnight this fee, all that kind of stuff, for those 5 offenses, what's a typical turnaround time to get bonded out? If I get a DUI today, am I out in time to come process my paperwork and get the Tapmans the next day and get my car out?
Yes, most of those, the license plate, the revocation, the DUI are all bondable offenses you can get out of as soon as you have somebody come with the money or as soon as you pay the money. So those you can get out right away. You literally could come here, except for a DUI, there's a mandatory hold on a DUI vehicle for 12 hours. That's by law. But aside from that, you could literally come here and get the release as soon as you get bonded out.
So the thing that I keep trying to drive home in these situations is that as we deal with our population of folks who are not very wealthy, and I'm not trying to justify any illegal behavior, but the reality is that we compound that, because what we've just discovered through this process is there's a $250 fee, there's the toll fees, potential storage, and bond. So what we're talking about here is going to be minimum $500 that somebody has to come up with immediately, and that depends on what the arrest was for, right? So who knows what that bond is going to be? Then the $250, then the fees, and if I didn't get out the very next day, we're talking easily. We start getting to $600-700 for people who, more than likely, what we've seen through our traffic stop data and stuff like that. We're not talking about the wealthiest part of our populations, and we're imposing this particular fee, not necessarily because we feel like we have to. Right? Now, again, I don't know. I haven't seen this. Maybe this was before my time. But if there was an analysis or a study done that said that our officers spend too much time on the side of the road waiting for people to come and pick up a car or a loved one to come pick it up, and it's costing us in man hours or it's costing us time, then I could see us moving down that road. I don't recall that ever taking place. Maybe it did. Chief, I mean, you've been here for a while. Do you know if something like that was ever done?
Not to my knowledge, there was nothing like that ever done. However, it is a common practice for us for safety reasons that we remove vehicles from the roadway as soon as possible. And only in unusual circumstances will we wait for someone to come get a vehicle.
All right, thank you, thank you. All right, I'm done. So it's been motioned, it's been second. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
Aye.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. All right, so, moving on. I done lost my place here now. All right. All right, ordinance number 2018-05035, an ordinance approving an amended and restated right-of-way license agreement with MDCJ LLC Public Works.
Good evening. I'm Brad Bennett, Assistant City Engineer. What you've got before you is a license agreement for 25 O'Clock Brewery at 208 West Griggs Street. And this is an amendment and restating of a earlier license agreement. They came in and constructed a patio along the side of their building that faces Griggs Street. They want to expand that patio approximately 30 feet to the west. They use it as the front entrance of their building and to be able to serve their customers. And they're also looking at the license agreement for a piece of property. It's a landscape bed currently along the east side of their building that faces the Boneyard Creek. They want to put some tables and chairs and be able to serve their patrons outside there. So we've got a restated agreement that has a term of 20 years. They would pay the city annually $1,128 for the use of that city right-of-way. I will point out for their property, the right-of-way line and the city property line for the Boneyard Creek crossing actually go right up to the face of their building. So they are, constrained as far as where they can put stuff because basically their property line is at their building walls. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, and I'd also like to thank the legal division for all their help in putting together the ordinance for this.
Good job. Any questions, council? Mr. Miller.
I'd like to make a motion that we send ordinance number 2018-05-035, an ordinance approving and amending a restated right-of-way license agreement with MDCJ LLC forward to the full council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved by
Sorry.
Alderman Miller, second by Alderman Hazen. Any further discussion? Alderperson Wu.
I'm just curious, did Craig leave already? Oh, you're right there, sorry. I thought I saw somebody leave, my bad. Who's responsible for maintaining that, that strip of land that faces Boneyard Creek? With this, who's responsible for?
Well, the city is currently responsible because it's actually part of the Boneyard Creek crossing currently. As part of this agreement, the property owner and business would take over that maintenance responsibility for that strip of landscape bed.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Resolution number 2018-05-017R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant for Market at the Square Farm Credit Illinois Grant SNAP Double Value Program FY 2018-2019 Community Development.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is basically, we talked about during the budget amendment earlier, it's a grant from Farm Credit of Illinois for the SNAP program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's a double value for patrons of the Market at the Square who use they're able to double value their link dollar, so they can use their link card to purchase up to $20. Up to $20, you can purchase up to $40 worth of tokens that they can spend at the market for scrumptious vegetables and fruit and fresh items that are made that are eligible for purchase. So that's what this is about. question.
Any questions? Mr. Miller?
John, I remember us voting on this last year, and I don't know if we had done it in years previous, but did we end up using all of our credit last year at the market? Do you know?
Yeah, I can tell you, during the 2017 season, $24,500 in combined SNAP and double value incentives was expended. So I think that the grant was more. And as I recall, I can get more information for you, but as I recall, the Farm Credit actually gave us more money after the first issue was expended pretty quickly. So they've been very generous with that.
Great. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderperson Wu.
I'd like to move resolution number 2018-05017R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant from Market at the Square, Farm Credit Illinois Grant SNAP Double Value Program.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Alderperson Wu, second by Alderperson Miller. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Resolution number 2018-05-018R, a resolution approving the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium FY 2018-2019 Annual Action Plan, Community Development. Hi, Kelly.
Yes, good evening. So before you is a resolution to approve the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 2018-2019. Normally, through the annual action plan and/or the consolidated plan process, plans are to be submitted to HUD no later than May 15th, 2018. However, over the last several years, HUD has not received its annual funding allocation, and therefore, they cannot compute the grantee allocations until appropriations are approved by Congress. In light of this, HUD set guidance regarding the submission of plans to help grantees prepare their plans to be submitted once allocations are announced. Grantees are encouraged to conduct the required citizen participation in its plan with estimated funding amounts and include a contingency provision which explains how the plan will be adjusted to match its annual actual allocation amounts. At the regular meeting of the Community Development Commission that was held on April 24th, the Commission reviewed the plan with the same allocations that we had for fiscal year 17-18, with the understanding that the budgets would reflect the actual allocation. On May 1st, 2018, the city received from our HUD rep that the final allocations had been determined and to prepare the plan to be submitted by June 30th. Neighborhood meetings and public hearings were held and are noted in the memo, as well as the proposed budget and a summary of recommendations regarding the utilization of CDBG and home funds. Once approved with any changes as needed, staff will refine the annual action plan with updated information and will submit to HUD the annual action plan by the end of the month, expected around the 25th of May. At its regularly scheduled meeting on April 24th, 2018, the Community Development Commission approved the annual action plan with changes as recommended by HUD. Therefore, the Community Development Commission and staff recommend approval of the annual action plan for 2018-2019. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Alderperson Brown.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I was trying to, I know this isn't your favorite thing to do every year, and it's really pretty complicated, but I was trying to figure out how the numbers on page 4 of your memo match the numbers in the draft plan. I just want to make sure that, looks like last year, we have several new target areas now, and they have different needs probably. There may be more participation in the whole house renovation, and I know we have a couple of capital improvement things scheduled to come out of CDBG. I think the sidewalk on Philo Road and maybe something else. So last year, it looks like on page 24 of the draft plan, the part for public facilities was $73,039. So would that automatically be increased by 11%? Do you know?
The amounts that are listed on page 4 are the amounts showing the increases.
So which line on page 4 does this public facilities go into?
That actually, our public facilities that we'll be using for the capital improvement will be carryover. This does not list like the carryover amounts that we have for the last several years. So this is just the funding for this 18-19.
So
we
in
don't have-
18-19, there's no new funding for public facilities?
There, as part of the property acquisition, demolition, new construction, infrastructure, it's all in that.
So
And again,
that's-
we have a lot of carryover from previous years that we are using for the capital improvements that we'll be doing next spring.
Okay, so the plan that was, the draft plan that was presented for public input, those numbers include carryover dollars?
I believe so, and we will update the numbers that are in there with the numbers that we've actually received. So we're
Okay.
in the process of doing that before we submit.
Okay, and then what's the process for, I suppose it's part of the public input process, but since our capital improvement plan is 5 years, how, for those areas that say, we provide a lot of street lighting in the King Park area, I think using CDBG money
Partly,
a few
yes.
years ago, and I assume we'll be doing some more intersection lighting in some of the new areas. So
Mhm.
how do we try to get projects on the next capital improvement? Do we go through Public Works and advocate there, or do we tell people they should do public input at these annual action plan meetings, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yes. We have received input from neighborhoods in the past about the light, and that we let them know that we would include that as we had funding available. And again, because we have some carryover, we were able to do those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Alderperson Wu.
So I'm curious, the CDBG funds increased 11% from last year, and then, I just had it a second ago. The other funds increased, what, 20%?
About 24%.
There we go. Yeah. Is there any idea as to why we got these increases? I'm not complaining, I'm just curious why we got the increase.
I believe it was because of the omnibus bill. There was an increase in funding for a lot of
At the federal
programs.
level
Mhm.
in October.
Yes, and that's how it then trickled to HUD, who then made the determination to increase everybody.
So was everybody increased by 24% and
No,
11%?
because they look at population and other
So it's done by
factors.
population?
Mm-hmm, and yes.
What other factors, just curious?
Off the top of my, I can't remember what all the factors. I know the population and the census and those kinds of things is what they look at. I can certainly.
It would be interesting, yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Alderperson, Alderman, what's your name again? Jacobson. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was Christmas in October charged to our credit card.
Any other comments, council members? So it's been moved, I don't remember. Has it been moved? All right.
I'll
Is there
make
a
the motion.
I'll entertain the motion.
I'll make a motion that we send resolution number 2018-05-018, our resolution approving the City of Urbana Home Consortium fiscal year 2018-19 annual action plan forward to full council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Miller, second by Alderman Jacobson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. All right, moving on to ordinance number 2018-02-013, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map, rezoning a portion of 500 Art Bartell Road from CRE to R4, plan case number 2333-M-18. It was in the committee of the whole in 2/26/18, community development.
Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
So this is two requests by Champaign County Board out of a package of 4 requests that were submitted. All information from the February 26th, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting staff report is still accurate and should be referenced. Some aspects have been researched further. I will summarize the important points from the earlier meeting and focus on the additional research that was conducted. To recap, the Champaign County Board is seeking to increase the flexibility of the continued operation of the Champaign County Nursing Home and has submitted 4 requests regarding use, zoning, and subdivision development. First, it submitted a request to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a conditional use permit to permit a skilled care nursing facility home in a proposed R4 zoning district. Second, it submitted a request to the Plan Commission to rezone the 14-acre portion of the county's 64-acre East Campus, which includes the site of the nursing home, from conservation, recreation, education to R4 medium-density multiple-family residential. Third, it submitted a request to the Plan Commission for waivers of the subdivision and land development code, which require minimum road standards, access to a public street, sidewalk installation, and street right-of-way dedication. Finally, it submitted a request to the Administrative Review Committee for a minor development of 12.3 acres to create the Champaign County Nursing Home subdivision. This final request will be reviewed after City Council has resolved the rezoning and subdivision waiver requests. On February 21st, the ZBA granted the request for the conditional use permit, which will permit this nursing home to continue to be operated by either a public or private entity if the R4 rezoning is approved. On February 22nd, Plan Commission voted 4-2 to recommend to City Council to approve the request for rezoning to R4. At the same meeting, the Commission voted 6-0 to recommend to City Council for approval and denial of various waivers to the code. On February 26th, the Committee of the Whole first discussed the requests for rezoning and waivers from the code and voted unanimously to hold them in committee for further discussion of the approval criteria. City Council approval is required for the rezoning and subdivision waiver requests. Some relevant points of background: in 2004, the city authorized establishment of the nursing home under a special use permit authorized by Section 77A of the zoning ordinance, which permits a government use by a public service entity in any zoning district. In January of 2018, the county board issued a request for proposals for parties interested in purchasing and operating the nursing home. It did receive one joint proposal from Evanston-based Extended Care Clinical LLC and Altitude Health Services. The potential buyer gave a presentation to the county board on May 9th of 2018. Due to the complexity of the package of the requests, it would be best to consider the 2 ordinances separately. I will review the material regarding the rezoning request first. Ms. Deb Busey, representing the county, would like to present the applicant's case after the staff report is concluded for the rezoning request. The existing nursing home is currently located in the CRE zoning district. The subject property is here in the center. It is surrounded by multiple county facilities, including the Satellite Jail and Juvenile Detention Center, which are also both institutional residential uses. We also have the Humane Society, Animal Control, Emergency Operations, and the Ilias facility, also the County Highway Department, and we have Canada Park to the west, Prairie Park to the south, and Weaver Park to the east. All of this land is currently exempt from city property tax. The 13.82 acre property proposed for rezoning, here shown in red, is part of the larger 63.5 acre Champaign County East campus. The rezoning would expand the existing R4 district here to the north. The city's comprehensive land use plan shows these designated future uses. The subject property and properties to the west, north, and southwest are all designated for institutional use, and land to the east and south are designated for park use. We also have some industrial lands designated further west, including the site of the Solo Dart container property. The proposed R4 zoning district would permit the existing skilled care nursing facility with a conditional use permit. This CUP was granted by the ZBA contingent on City Council approval of the proposed rezoning. The county board could have requested a higher intensity zoning district to expand, say, this R6 high-density multiple-family residential district to the northwest, but it requested the lower intensity R4 zoning district to preserve the character of the surrounding area. Rezoning the property would also correct the current zoning designations of the juvenile detention center. Currently, the center is split zoned with the south half in the CRE zoning district and the north half in the R4 zoning district. The proposed R4 zone would permit a mix of low and medium density residential uses. The location east of Art Bartel Road is very accessible to current and future residents, employees, and visitors, and is within walking distance of Prairie and Weaver Parks to the east and south. Art Bartel Road links two major collector public streets, and each intersection has a transit stop. There are dedicated bicycle lanes along East Main Street to the north and 1 block south along East Washington Street, and an off-street side path along Learman Avenue. Discussion at the previous committee of the whole meeting brought up questions regarding what issues could be considered when the rezoning request is discussed. City staff confirmed that discussion must be limited to those criteria set forth in the case of LaSalle National Bank versus County of Cook in 1957, in which the Illinois Supreme Court developed a list of factors that are paramount in evaluating the legal validity of a zoning classification for a particular property. In addition to these 6 criteria, the Illinois Supreme Court added 2 more factors to consider during the case of Sinclair Pipeline Company versus Village of Richton Park in 1960. The Supreme Court did not allow consideration of politics or general policy in either of these cases. In order to maximize the defensibility of their decision, City Council's decision must be based only on an objective application of these 8 criteria. Staff have re-examined and expanded on their previous analysis of the LaSalle criteria and added an analysis of the 2 Sinclair criteria for the requested rezoning. The first LaSalle factor is that the proposed R4 district is compatible with the existing zoning and land uses. It expands the existing R4 district to the north. Also, the proposed R4 district allows low to medium density residential development, which matches the current residential functions of the nursing home as well as the adjacent juvenile detention center and satellite jail. Other courts have found this factor, existing land uses and zoning, to be of paramount importance when considering the proposed zoning classification. In summary, the expansion of the adjacent R4 district should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. The second factor is the extent to which property values are diminished by the restrictions of the ordinance. In this case, one would expect that there would be no change in the value of neighboring properties due to the fact that the use of the nursing home would remain the same in services, scale, and intensity under the terms of the conditional use permit recently granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. This expected stability in neighboring property values should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. The third factor is the extent to which the ordinance promotes the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public. Currently, the facility provides skilled care, nursing facilities, and services to lower income residents of the county. The proposed rezoning would not harm the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public, as it would continue to provide that skilled residential health care in a safe environment at the same level of services, scale, and intensity as originally envisioned for the 2004 special use permit. The nursing home currently provides health care to lower income residents of Champaign County and it is quite likely that, given the overall income demographics of other nursing homes in the area, for example, Clark Lindsay, that the nursing home would continue to allocate beds and rooms to residents receiving Medicare and Medicaid. Section 22 of the post-closing covenants, which I believe are Exhibit E, included in the purchase agreement, Exhibit H, drafted by the county board, include that all persons who are residents of the facility on the closing date shall continue to be residents after the closing date, and purchasers shall ensure no existing resident shall be transferred by new operator to another facility, A, without the written consent of such resident, or B, for medical necessity as determined by a medical professional in accordance with standard industry practice. The second covenant indicates that at least 50% of the licensed beds shall be reserved for Medicaid-eligible persons to the extent allowed by law, and new operator and its successors and assigns will use their absolute best efforts to accept all such Medicaid-eligible residents. The proposed rezoning would facilitate the continued operation of the property by either the county board or a private nursing home operator, which would be beneficial to the general welfare of the public. This continuation of skilled healthcare service should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. LaSalle Factor 4 is concerning the relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed on the individual property owner. There would be little or no gain to the public if the proposed rezoning were approved or denied, as the use would remain the same as it is now. If the rezoning is approved, the number of beds and rooms could remain the same. If the requested rezoning were denied, the county board may be forced to close the facility due to a lack of funds in order to operate it themselves, and an inability to sell the property due to zoning restrictions. This will eliminate all of the beds and rooms currently available. This would impose a substantial hardship on the county board, as well as on current and potential residents of the nursing home. The relative gain to the public and the elimination of hardship to the individual owner created by the proposed rezoning should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. LaSalle Factor 5 is regarding the suitability of the subject property for the proposed use. The nursing home currently is currently suitable for the zoned purpose, providing residential skilled health care. Denial of the rezoning request may make the property unsuitable, as the county board may be forced to close the facility due to lack of funds and inability to sell it to a private operator due to current zoning restrictions. Granting the proposed rezoning request, coupled with the recent granting of the conditional use permit, would either continue its current level of suitability or possibly improve that suitability, as the new operator would presumably have sufficient funds to operate the facility. This continued or improved suitability should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. LaSalle Factor 6 is regarding the length of time the property has been vacant as zoned. The subject property has been operated as a skilled care nursing facility home since 2007. Granting the rezoning request would allow continued operation by either a public or private entity. Denying the rezoning request may force the county board to close the facility due to lack of funds and inability to sell it to a private operator due to zoning restrictions, creating a vacancy that may be difficult to resolve. The proposed rezoning's plan for continued occupancy and resulting reduced probability of near-term future vacancy should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. Sinclair Factor number 1 is regarding the community's need for more of the proposed use. The proposed rezoning does not propose to add more nursing home rooms or beds. However, as Champaign County's population ages, the need for more skilled care nursing facilities is likely to increase, not decrease. Granting the proposed rezoning may at least maintain the status quo number of rooms and beds, regardless if the nursing home is continued to be operated by the county board or sold to a public or private entity. On the other hand, denying the request could decrease the number of beds and rooms in the county, as the county board may be forced to close the nursing home due to a lack of operating funds and the inability to sell the nursing home due to current zoning restrictions. The fact that the proposal maintains the present number of beds or rooms does not provide more should weigh neutrally or in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. And finally, Sinclair factor number 2 regards the care with which the community has planned its land use development. The 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan has designated the subject property for institutional use, which would include use as a skilled care nursing facility. Similar facilities are located in areas designated for institutional use, such as Amber Glen, while others are located in areas designated for mixed-use residential, like Prairie Winds, or multifamily, such as Brookdale and Clark Lindsay Village. The proposed rezoning would meet the following goals of the comprehensive plan. Goal 15, encourage compact, contiguous, and sustainable growth patterns. Goal 34, encourage development in areas where adequate infrastructure already exists. And Goal 43, provide for the distribution of social services to Urbana residents with diverse needs. The proposed rezoning to R4 would allow for the continued operation of the nursing home and should not introduce the potential for future uses that would be incompatible with existing nearby uses. This compliance with the planned use for the area should weigh in favor of the applicant's request for rezoning. Fundamental principles of zoning are to either maintain or increase the compatibility of adjacent land uses and to mitigate or eliminate incompatibilities. The comprehensive plan is the manifestation of the goals and vision of how this should develop. The proposed R4 zoning district is the best option to allow the nursing home to continue to operate within the institutional future land use designation, as it is the least intensive zoning district that permits a skilled care nursing facility. The proposed rezoning is less intense than the nearby R6 high-density multiple family residential zoning district, and it would also standardize the current split zoning of the juvenile detention center from both CRE and R4 simply to R4. The findings are summarized in the staff report. The highlights are that the Champaign County Board has filed a petition to amend the Urbana zoning map from CRE to R4 medium density multiple family residential zoning district. The zoning change would facilitate the continued operation of the nursing home. The zoning change generally conforms to the LaSalle and Sinclair criteria, and the property continues to be appropriate for an institutional residential use due to its proximity to other institutional uses and nearby parks. For the ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map, the City Council has the following options. Approve the proposed ordinance as presented with a majority vote. Approve the proposed amendment to the ordinance as modified by any specific suggested changes with a majority vote, or do not approve the proposed ordinance. At its February 22nd meeting, the Urbana Plan Commission voted 4 ayes to 2 nays to recommend to City Council to approve the request for rezoning to R4 medium density multiple family residential zoning district. Staff concurs with the recommendations of the Plan Commission. This concludes the staff report, and I am available to answer questions. Ms. Deb Busey would like to present the applicant's case for the rezoning after discussion. There are several additional county representatives attending to provide additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Busey, would you like to come up now? So I have cards from Ms. Busey and Mr. Weibel. Would you guys like to split 5 minutes? Is that what you want to do?
She can go first. I just have comments afterwards.
Okay, all right.
Good evening. I'm Deb Busey, Interim County Administrator. Also with me this evening are Pius Weibel, the County Board Chair, John Hall, Director of Planning and Zoning, Jacob Krogert, Assistant State's Attorney, and Van Anderson, who is the Special Projects Administrator working with the nursing home issues on behalf of the County Board. We are here tonight to talk with you about the zoning map amendment and waivers of subdivision ordinance regarding the Champaign County Nursing Home. The Champaign County Board provides mandated services through its general fund with the goal of providing high-quality, impactful services to Champaign County residents. These are all offices that provide services through the general fund operations, and generally speaking covers law enforcement for outside of the municipal jurisdictions within the county, the criminal justice system countywide, real estate tax cycle system countywide, election services, real estate recording services, and a variety of administrative functions that are all mandated by the statutes to be provided through county government. The Champaign County Board also, where possible, has a goal to provide non-mandated services that improve the quality of life of county residents. One goal is to maintain a viable, vibrant, skilled nursing facility with 220 beds to serve Champaign County. Another goal is to continue the implementation of social justice reforms and programs with our community partners, which currently include the Youth Assessment Center and the Reentry Program. Providing care for the elderly and those with limited resources in Champaign County has a long history. In the 1930s, the Champaign County Poor Farm transitioned to the Champaign County Nursing Home, providing long-term care for elderly and indigent individuals. In 1965, Medicaid was enacted to help with medical costs for people with limited income or resources. Basically, Medicaid at that point became the safety net. Today, the nursing home does not accept residents without a payer source, whether it's private pay, Medicare, or Medicaid. And this is true of long-term care and skilled nursing facilities throughout the region, throughout the state, throughout the country, whether they are publicly or privately operated. The current status of the Champaign County Nursing Home is that it is experiencing extreme financial challenges. Accounts payable as of April 2018 stands at $4.4 million, with some of those obligations dating back to as old as October 2015. The nursing home owes to its outside vendors $2.19 million, and the nursing home owes to other Champaign County funds $2.22 million. These other funds include self-funded insurance, the Health Insurance Fund, IMRF, Social Security, and the General Fund. In addition to this incredibly high outstanding AP, based on the operations of the nursing home in fiscal year 2017, and based on the management company SAK, which is currently operating the home, summary of operations since July of 2017 when they took over, the nursing home currently operates at an annual deficit, which is effectively a structural deficit of approximately $1 million, even with the $1.2 million property tax operating subsidy that the nursing home receives. These facts, combined with the long-term negative financial history of the nursing home, makes it imperative that the county board take action to ensure Champaign County retains this skilled nursing facility and the services that are currently provided by the Champaign County Nursing Home. To that end, there are two options that we're going to talk to you about which the county board is currently or can look at. The first was to sell the nursing home. In June of 2017, the county board engaged Marcus & Millichap to provide property brokerage and consulting services to assist with looking at the sale of the nursing home. With their assistance, the county board authorized the release of an RFP for the sale of the nursing home on January 9th, 2018. On January 15th, Marcus & Millichap fully published that RFP and provided resources for structuring and working through that sale through the opening of a marketing room. On February 28th, 2018, the proposals were due. Basically, this was the bid deadline. At the point of the bid deadline, the broker informed the county of the following information. One thing to note is that we sent this opportunity out to several thousand groups across the country. It was very widely marketed, to say the least. At the end of the day, we only received one offer at our $11 million price. The market and buyers are very efficient, and when they see value, they act quickly. If the asset were priced at 7 to 8 million, I feel we would have had a handful of offers, but at 11 million, it was very difficult. These are all quotes from our broker. Moving forward, the terms and conditions of option 1, which is the sale of the nursing home, requires the following. The nursing home must remain at least 220 nursing home beds retained, with additional permitted uses limited to skilled nursing, geriatric center, long-term care facility, or assisted living facility until December 31st, 2027. The buyer will be required to assume the collective bargaining agreements that exist in the home now. The buyer will be required to provide greater than or equal to 90% of the employees being retained during the first 60 days and greater than or equal to 80% of the employees being retained during the first 6 months. Additional terms are that the employees will be rehired by the buyer at their current salary levels with benefits similar to those that they currently receive. Priorities for admissions shall first be given to Champaign County residents for a period of 10 years. The proposer must agree to set aside 50% of the beds for Medicaid residents for a period of 10 years. And the current nursing home residents have the right to remain as long as they like, as long as they are eligible for skilled nursing facility level of care. So with this option 1, we are able to maintain what has been and what are the current services and staffing and operations of the nursing home, just with a private owner instead of with a public owner of Champaign County. Option 2 is for the county board to retain the county nursing home, and for this to be done and to deal with the current financial constraints of the nursing home, there will be budget impacts of retention. First, on the nursing home itself. The nursing home will be required to cut funding and staffing for any non-mandated services that they currently provide. Examples of these include the adult daycare program, an on-staff dental hygienist, and a beauty shop and beauty services that are provided for the residents. The current nursing home will also have to cut staffing levels of mandated services operating above mandated staffing levels when and to the extent necessary to meet the budgetary requirements. The general corporate fund is the only fund from which the county board can appropriate monies to help offset the operating deficit of the nursing home. This would require a cut to the general corporate fund in order to assume payment of the outstanding nursing home debt obligation, or its AP, and to also provide the operating subsidy to cover the structural deficit. This total amount would be $2.63 million for the first 2 years, each year. $2.63 million in 2019, $2.63 million in 2020, and then that amount would drop to $1.93 million in year 3. In order to implement that level of cuts to the general fund, the county board and the elected officials and department heads will have to first cut any non-mandated services and programs that are currently being provided and funded by the county. 2 of those most notable programs are the Youth Assessment Center, which currently receives funding of $238,000 from the county, and the Reentry Program, which receives $100,000 of funding from the county. I'd just like to say at this point that no one thinks it's a good idea to cut these programs. These are valuable programs that have evolved and are providing excellent services within the community. But Champaign County is not mandated to provide these programs, so if dollars from the general fund have to be appropriated to operating the nursing home, then these are the types of cuts that the county board is going to have to consider. Finally, the remaining cuts will have to come from 8.2% cuts to the total personnel budget for the general corporate fund, which currently all of those personnel positions are providing mandated services. This is a level of cuts that will not be easy to manage and will definitely result in diminished services in some of the operations and services that the citizens of this community rely on, in law enforcement, in the criminal justice system, in the real estate systems, and in other areas of operations of county government. Pursuing option 1 will require the sale of the nursing home to a non-government entity, and the existing special use permit will no longer apply. Therefore, the new subdivision and zoning approvals are necessary from the City of Urbana, which is why we're here this evening. Ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map, as your staff have told you, requires changes the current CRE conservation, recreation, education zoning to the proposed R4 medium-density multiple-family residential. Proposed zoning expands the current R4 zoning district from the north. Proposed zoning would allow for the subdivision of 12.315 acres to create the Champaign County Nursing Home subdivision to allow for the continued use of the property as a skilled nursing facility. And proposed zoning corrects the current zoning designation of the Juvenile Detention Center, which is currently split between the R4 zone to the north and the CRE zone to the south. And the proposed changes are consistent with the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan. Our next slide focuses on the subdivision, and I've been asked to wait to go forward with that until you have further discussion.
Mr. Wyman.
Thank you. I just have a few comments. Ms. Busey's talked about cuts that would have to be made if we retain the nursing home, but there's other impacts too. For example, as you know, the Racial Justice Task Force completed a report approximately a year ago now, I think. It contains many recommendations that I think are useful, but they cost money. If we retain the nursing home, I would say that any of those proposals in that report for the next 3 years are dead in the water, because we're just looking to cut money for the next 3 years. And unfortunately, 3 years from now, with that report sort of be collecting dust, I'm afraid it would not go anywhere. Finally, we have another issue of that our buildings need work. Because we've not had much money in the last 15, 20 years, we've not been able to maintain our buildings as well as they should be. The county board right now is looking at a plan to try to work on our buildings. It's about a 20 billion year program in 10 years. Did I say 20 billion? 20 million in 10 years. That's $200 million a year. Right now, our current capital improvement plan for the building is what, $450,000 a year?
530.
530. So that's about $150,000 less. Or rather, we needed $1,500,000 more really to adequately work on our buildings. So these are some of the issues we're up against. It's basically a rock against we're behind the rock against the wall. And so, unfortunately, that's what has pushed us to consider selling the nursing home. And I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Alderman Miller.
Hey, Pius, how's it going?
Sorry?
I said, how's it going?
Huh.
So, from what I understand, even if we grant the zoning and you get the 15 votes you need to push this forward, you still have to go through due diligence, correct?
Correct.
And the due diligence doesn't sound like it has a very high threshold for them to be able to pull out this buyer. I think it was $150,000 I read.
That's correct.
Okay. Oh, I'm just weighing that into consideration as I'm considering on this, because obviously it's still got a long road ahead, even if we were to grant the zoning approval. Thank you. I'll have more.
Any other questions? Alderman Brown.
Yeah, I think I remember the answer to this, but did you also look for a private, not-for-profit buyer before you put it up for sale?
Not separately. It was advertised to everybody.
Oh, so just any so a private, not-for-profit, like a charity or a religious organization would have had to bid at a minimum of $11 million?
What it comes down to is there's not very many entities like that in this part of the country. But it certainly was advertised to all those entities as well.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? So I have a couple questions. Mr. Jacobson, would you like to take over the chair, please?
I'll be happy to take the chair and recognize Mr. Ammons.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Pius, for your presentation. You said that there's I don't know if you spoke to this, but I think I recall seeing that there was some bonds that are also outstanding on the nursing home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that listed in, is that a part of the 4.4 million or any of those numbers that you shared?
It is not.
So how much does the county owe for the nursing home?
Currently, the
bonds?
outstanding bonds are right at about 8.2 million.
So in essence, the county board would sell the nursing home for $11 million and still owe $8 million.
The proceeds from the sale would first go to paying the bonds off, yes.
So the sale, the $11 million would be used to pay off the 8.8 million.
8.2.
8.2. And there's some other outstanding amounts that you have listed. So total, the 8,000,082, along with the, is it 4.4? The numbers that you listed here, I don't know
Right.
exactly what they were all for, but we would add all these numbers up, looks like about $8 million, along with the $8 million in bonds. And so we would sell it for possibly 11 and still owe 5 million, basically. No, I just want to make sure I have some clarity on
It wouldn't be quite that much, but the proceeds from the sale would not cover all of the obligations. We anticipate it would cover the obligations of the bonds and the obligations to our outstanding vendors. We would still have revenues coming in for services that have been provided and not yet paid for, which would also go towards paying some of the outstanding obligations.
Okay. And according to what was shared, that the broker said that it was sent to thousands of people, or thousands of entities and organizations, and one entity responded with the exact amount that we were selling it for.
They
Offering.
responded by providing exactly what was being requested in the RFP, yes.
So we sent out an RFP with the amount we wanted to sell it for.
With a minimum amount that we wanted to receive and the requirements for operating it moving forward.
So, and that speaks to the 90% and of the workforce being maintained, 80%, you said
All
all
of those
things.
issues were directly from the RFP and our requirements that any proposer or buyer had to agree to be in complete compliance with the RFP.
And according to where you guys are right now, did any of those requirements change?
No.
For instance, so the buyer at this particular point is willing to accept the terms of the agreement as they exist?
That's correct.
Without any negotiations?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. Jim, as far as the LaSalle requirements, is there a particular number of them that are supposed to be met? Or is there basically, council members could see one or two things that they thought were not met?
It's an overall evaluation. If they don't meet one criteria, that doesn't mean that you have to vote no. If they just meet one criteria, you can vote yes. It's a preponderance of the criteria. You weigh the criteria and nothing more than LaSalle and the Sinclair criteria. If you go beyond that, your vote can easily be challenged.
And there were some things that were presented by Marcus. And what concerned me, there were some things presented as if they were fact. They were actually opinions from what I heard you say. And some of them were going back to, I'm trying to look back through the points that you made here. I didn't write them all down. I was actually just kind of looking at the screen. But the nursing home, if it's sold, you said that it could result in losing the nursing home in particular, if it's not sold, right?
Could you restate the question?
If it's not sold, there's a risk of us not having the 220 beds. Right.
That is correct if the county board cannot continue to operate the nursing home themselves, and they feel that their only other option is to close it, then it would no longer be functioning, and therefore those beds would not be operational. So that would be a loss of the beds and rooms.
So there's several different, if you will, hypotheticals that to go along with that. So it cannot be presented as fact that we would lose them.
I did not present it as fact.
Okay.
I
I
gave
appreciate
those
that.
as two different options that could happen.
Okay. Ms. Busey, according with your experience as the interim administrator, but of course we know you served for a long time as the county administrator. What, if I recall correctly, there was another private entity that was brought in to run the nursing home so that it would run and to make profit and to break even. Was that MPA was the name of that?
MPA was the other management company that was hired to manage the operation of the nursing home, yes.
And that didn't work?
Well, they managed the nursing home for 9 years.
But they didn't bring us out of the issue that we find ourselves in now.
Well, it's cyclical. They brought us out of a similar financial challenging time when they first came in. In 2008, the general fund paid $2.8 million of obligations on behalf of the nursing home and was never repaid. And the goal of the county board for MPA was that it operate the nursing home without requiring any subsidy from the general fund or other funds. And MPA functionally did that the entire time they were managing. However, in the last, their contract ended in June of 2017, and in 2016, the end of 2015 and 2016, the AP began to start to slip because there was a slowdown in reimbursement of payments from the state, and that continues to be an issue and a problem today.
So what we have is a problem because MPA was able to run it without a deficit when the Medicaid payments came in on time.
Yes.
Right. And then when that didn't happen, they bailed and a new company came in, and now they've been trying to run it, and they're saying that they're also behind because of the Medicaid payments, right?
MPA did not respond to the RFP for 2017. SAK was selected and is having a great deal of difficulty managing the financial, basically cash flow to operate the nursing home.
So I'm trying to understand why this entity is going, how they're going to be able to run the nursing home and what changes they're going to make that we couldn't make, that the county board couldn't make.
You know, I would like to ask Mr. Anderson to answer that question for you because he's worked on that question at length over the term of this process, okay?
Thank you.
In answer to that specific question, it's economies of scale. In the current market for nursing homes, it's really tough for owners of just a single home or even two homes to actually keep their costs down so that they can actually afford to continue operations. The entity that is put in the proposal to purchase the nursing home has a total of 18 facilities in the Chicagoland area, which includes Northwest Indiana as well. And they also have homes in different states. And so they have the economies of scale to keep the costs down. Where we go out and have to bid our costs based on a home that has 140 residents, now they're talking about number of homes with thousands of residents. And so we just can't match that kind of economy of scale.
And could you give me an example of why the economy of scale would save them money? What are they purchasing that saves them money? What are they getting that decreases their cost?
Certainly, everything. Food service, rehabilitation services, any service that comes into a nursing home, they're saving money on. All your
Just because they can-
supplies, everything that is needed to keep a nursing home operational, they're able to save money by having that large number of homes servicing an extremely large number of people compared to ours.
Is it, to your knowledge, illegal or unethical for nursing homes to collaborate to make those purchases? For instance, if there were other publicly ran nursing homes, could they purchase those services as a conglomerate?
I don't know of any that exist at this time. I don't know, I have not researched that, so I can't answer that directly.
I mean, we're making a decision to ultimately, after 10 years, this would be a private nursing home, in essence.
It would be a private nursing home immediately after sale.
Well, what I meant by is that the people who are there, there's a 10-year window of something about the payments I saw. 50% of the Medicaid beds for 10 years is what I'm speaking to. What I'm saying is that this is a tremendous asset and a tremendous need for us in our community, for our seniors, and for us to be talking about selling it without exploring all aspects of how to keep it is somewhat mind-boggling to me. So that's why I was asking the questions about conglomerates or
Certainly.
being able to purchase things together
And-
to address those needs.
And I'd like to say that there's been a tremendous number of people at the county working on this, trying to find ways to keep the home operational. And as we look at this option to sell, this isn't something that was taken lightly. And I will say that all of the requirements that were put into the RFP, all of the things that Ms. Busey went through that this buyer has agreed to, those actually scared off other buyers. We put in the RFP, meaning the county. That was done before I came on board as a special projects administrator. Those requirements were put in so they can keep the same flavor of a nursing home that we have. When we put in only 50% of the Medicaid beds would be Medicaid eligible. This particular group, Extended Care Clinical and Altitude Health Services, some of their homes run as high as 75 to 85% Medicaid beds. They service a large number of Medicaid individuals, much larger than we can because we can't do it and stay open. And so this is something, we were afraid that, people wouldn't agree to that, and that was something that they didn't even blink at because they run at much higher levels, again, because of the economies of scale. And again, this is HR services to the home, the rehab services, the financial services to the homes. Even though each home is run as an independent entity and they have their own in-house services for each of those categories, there's a group of supporting companies that provide them the additional resources that we don't have available to our home being run as a single entity home.
No, I definitely can appreciate that. I understand the importance. I think Ms. Busey spoke to the importance of the Medicaid payments being slowed down or really being a hindrance for MPA and now for SAK. For us as the county, period, for those payments are critical. It's certainly my hope that things will change in November, and maybe sometimes after that those payments would speed up. So that's possible that might be a change on the horizon as well. So I can understand the payments are not coming in. We're all trying to pay bills as the city or as the county, and I certainly do want to make sure, I have an interest in making sure that the county funds are where they're supposed to and the departments are running the way that they're supposed to as well. So I appreciate you sharing the information. I'm still very concerned about the direction of the nursing home because it's such a vital asset for so many people in our community, especially low income. You mentioned Clark Lindsey, but most of the people that I represent couldn't afford to go to Clark Lindsey.
And Clark Lindsey does not have any Medicaid eligible beds. And
I
again,
understand.
this is one of the things that's so important about what the thought that the county put into the RFP itself, because they put those requirements in, and the requirements that you saw up there for this 10-year period having these beds, that's something that will be recorded with the deed. So this is not something that can be changed. And again, one of the things that we saw when the proposed buyers were here for their presentation and interview by the county board was that, you know, they really didn't chafe at those things again because they run homes like that, high levels Medicaid, supporting those types of populations, and even in areas, you know, low-income cities, areas of cities.
So, I mean, that to me, when I think about all the RFPs and stuff that I'm accustomed to or I see as a trustee, there are things that you can put in the RFP. And if 50% of Medicaid beds for 10 years is something they wouldn't even balk at, then, and looking at and doing the due diligence and realizing that they have Medicaid patients at the levels in which you're describing, then why would we put a 10-year window on it? Why 10 years? Why not make it higher than that? Why not make it 25, 30 years? I mean, why not?
Because we can't change the RFP once it's published.
I understand
So
you
it's
can't
in our-
change it now.
it's
What
in
I'm
our-
saying is, why wouldn't it be put in from the beginning if the due diligence was done on when you did the RFP and you knew that these companies or this particular company had Medicaid patients like that? Then
I can answer that. I think it's a question of balance. Do you want to scare off your buyers or not? I mean, the longer you make them, more likely to scare people off. What it really comes down to is demographics. Right now, if someone came in to take over that nursing home, there's no way they can, you know, not have 60, 70 Medicaid patients. The demographics are not there. If they went to all private, it'd be a mighty small nursing home.
all right, I'm done. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Emmons, you may have the chair back.
All right, any further discussion, questions? Alderman Brown.
Just another clarification. And I think Ms. Busey said that currently the nursing home doesn't accept residents without payer source, and the new proposed buyers wouldn't either. When I was at the meeting the other night, I think county board members talked about Medicaid pending and said that you don't accept Medicaid pending, and I think the responder said they would accept some Medicaid pending. Is that what they were talking about, this payer source?
Yes, I believe so.
So they do some kind of pre-analysis of the Medicaid
There is some analysis you can
potential.
do about Medicaid pending to assess where that application is.
Okay, so currently our nursing home would just say, no, you have to wait until we get this, until you're not Medicaid pending, you're Medicaid approved.
You could be Medicaid pending as long as certain criteria were met, I believe, and we would have to determine whether or not those criteria were met before we would accept you.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Mayor, would you please
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Jared. I'll go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm just thinking, future term, again, you know, brought up the vote and all of that. If due diligence falls through and they back out, do you think that it will ultimately result in the county board voting to do what you have said? And those will, there's no chance they're going to put another question on the ballot to raise the tax to bring the issue forward again. It's just that one vote, one referendum, and we're done talking about that. Is that your opinion?
I think I can answer that question. Well, first of all, my biggest fear is if that the nursing home doesn't sell and we retain it, that the nursing home will die by attrition. We're running out of money. The vendors want to get paid. We don't have the money to pay them. You know, basically, our care system could start collapsing. That's my biggest fear. As far as there's been talk about having another referendum to acquire some more property tax monies, but that has to pass the county board. There's no guarantee of that. In addition, I did a little bit of math on that. If we did put up a proposal, pass the county board, got it on the agenda, let's say Urbana carries it by 70 to 3%. Outside of Champaign-Urbana, it loses by 60 to 40. Those numbers are fairly realistic, I think. We still have to carry Champaign. Champaign taxpayers are not happy right now. They just got their new tax bills because of the school referendum was passed 2 years ago. I can tell you that the treasurer's office is getting a lot of phone calls from people who are surprised. Why are their tax bills so high? Well, they weren't aware of the impacts of the school referendum passing. So that's a big issue right now. I don't think we carry Champaign. That'd be the biggest problem. And they are the bulk of the population of the county. But it's still possible, but those are the things we're running up against. I'm trying to be realistic here.
Okay, well, I totally agree. Had this discussion with county board members as well, and everybody seems to think the same thing. You know, it is a gamble to put another referendum on that. I just wanted to know that it would be considered.
There's been discussion of it.
I think it would be right for it to be considered. What's the timeline of this sale? Can you guys go over that with me one more time?
The vote to approve the sale is on the agenda for the county board on May 24th. And if it is approved, the due diligence period would start May 25th. And we are anticipating a closing on July 31st.
Has the buyer or the interested buyer made any or voiced any concerns about a timeline? Obviously, they're operating 18 other facilities. They're probably doing well for themselves, not highly dependent on our facility to make their company work. Have they expressed concerns about a timeline, about the quickness or?
They actually prefer the shorter time frame for the closing. They prefer the 60 days for the closing.
But they have not made any demands that it has to be within that time frame.
They've agreed with us
agreed.
that is an appropriate amount of time for due diligence. And with a May 25th start of the due diligence period, we should be able to close on July 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Council, Mayor.
On the impact of not closing the nursing home, the 8.2% cut in the personnel budget, I assume that's not just an even across the board 8.2% from each department. It's going to hit some departments heavier than others, and it's certainly not just 8% of the total jobs. It's going to be many jobs lost in this transition.
Yes, it is something that we would work out during our budget process, which starts officially in June. The board adopts the budget process direction in May. And because Champaign County cut its workforce by 11% during the economic downturn in 2010 and has really only regained 2% of those positions, there is not a single office of county government where you can look and see that there are positions that could be cut and not impact the services. So exactly how those cuts are implemented through the budget process is something that we're going to have to work through if we have to do that during the months of June and July. But I would expect that it would impact some offices more than others.
Including hours of service as well
Correct.
as personnel?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I also want to point out that, as Deb mentioned, it will be affecting the nursing home itself too. So the nursing home itself won't be operating like it was before, which of course is not good either.
Well, that's the other thing, is the quality of life for the nursing home residents when you start cutting the non-mandated services. And my mother's in assisted living, and I visit their nursing home there as well. And I know for a fact that things like a beauty shop and the personal care services, the dental hygiene, access to those services makes a critical difference in people's everyday life and their well-being. And that's what concerns me, is the loss of that quality of life as well.
Any further discussions, questions?
So
I guess, no, questions. Actually, there's another person for public input on the issue. Jacob, how do you say it? Kroger? Yeah.
Kroger, and I can answer any questions that the council might have perhaps after or during discussion of the subdivision waivers on that next ordinance, but I have nothing to add to Mr. Weibel and Mr. Anderson and Mr. Busey's comments.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, well, we have to have a motion. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move recommending to the full council adoption of this zoning request.
I'll second it.
Do we need to have it read into the record? Charlie, is that fine? All right. So it's been moved by Mr. Jacobson, second by Mr. Hazen. Any further discussion? Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I think in order to deny this zoning, I mean, you can't argue that it's already being used as a nursing home, so the use wouldn't change. I think in order to argue that it's detrimental to the health and welfare of the community, you'd have to have evidence that a private nursing home can't run as well as our public nursing home is currently running. And I think it probably can, and it probably would. But I think it'll be important for the community to do what they can, if the sale, assuming the sale goes through, to make sure that the quality of care stays high. And I think one of the things that one of the administrators that was there said she did in her home in Nebraska was had a community advisory committee that could have input on the care and you know, keeping track of loved ones when they're in the home. It would be a loss, you know, if we don't have the county nursing home. Both my parents spent their final months and weeks in the old county nursing home years ago, and they received good care. And I've been in other private nursing homes since then, and I can't tell a lot of difference. They seem to get good care there too. So I think it would be a real stretch to say that it would be impossible for a private nursing home to do as good a job as the public nursing home does. They've said that they would do the percentage of Medicaid, and as been pointed out, if they increase the overall census, that would increase actually the number of beds available to Medicaid over what we have now. So a couple other things just that I noticed at the meeting the other night. They mentioned that they would do a better job of providing services and amenities for people, relatives of people with people in the nursing home, like places to visit with them. And I actually haven't been in the new nursing home, so I don't know what's there already. But it sounds like with all their nursing home experience, that's the one thing they do. They would focus on it. They know their marketing. They know. And it is partly is a deal dependent on marketing, because the way nursing homes are used now, you go in and out because you get services, you get rehabilitated, you may go back 2 or 3 times. It's not quite the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago, where you just plan on spending the rest of your life there once you go in. So I'm going to vote for this. I appreciate all the work the county board has put in over the many years they've been dealing with this. It's unfortunate that they haven't found a different solution. I don't know if they will, but that's the decision that 2/3 of the board is going to make. And I don't feel like it's our, I don't feel like I would want to try to tell them that their years and years of dealing with this is somehow less, that somehow I know more, and would try to deny that with all the work that they've been putting in.
Alderman Miller.
One last question for you folks. How much of the population right now is Medicaid or Medicare in the nursing home currently?
Medicaid pending's been right at about
44 Medicaid pending, I think.
which is about 30%, right?
Yeah.
And the Medicaid is, so probably right at about 60% total.
Probably, yeah,
with
60.
Medicaid pending and
Yeah.
Medicaid.
Currently in-house, there's 60%.
Currently, yeah.
But it does move up and down.
Sure. Residents come and go. Okay. That's all for me for right now. Thanks.
On the issue of the LaSalle criteria, Jim, just want to make sure that we're super clear on this. You're saying that basically council members can read through the LaSalle criteria, come to a conclusion based upon our understanding of that, and that meets the legal requirements.
I think if you were to question the presentations that have been made in terms of satisfying the LaSalle criteria, it would be appropriate to identify those specific criteria that you think have not been met and why they haven't been met. You can't talk about broad policy, you can't talk about politics, you can't talk about, gee, what you would like to see or not see on that site. You have to, whatever those criteria that you think have not been met, I think it's appropriate that whoever feels a particular criterion has not been met, put on the record. Because if you vote based on something other than criteria and somebody were to challenge that vote, i.e. bring suit to challenge the basis, i.e. not applying the criteria, the city would have to defend that suit, and that would be a difficult defense. Looking at the criteria, I looked at this criteria before I saw, and I'm fairly familiar with both cases, and I looked at the criteria, all of them, and I don't, my recollection is, and I did a fairly detailed analysis, I think it would be hard, with maybe one exception, to find that the criteria are not met. When you look at the property, its current use, its intended use, and when you look at criterion 1, which, as Marcus has indicated, some courts, not all, but some courts consider that paramount. Obviously, courts disagree. Other courts don't discuss it in terms of paramountness. Clearly, the property continuing its use under a new zoning classification, if you were to accept paramountness for that criteria, this criteria would be clearly met because it's continuing. There may be subtle nuances 10 years down the road in terms of employment, for instance, whether or not they retain the current employees or not. It would be a stretch maybe to bring that under the public health and general welfare, but that I would view more in terms of what the property is serving rather than what the property is employing and all. But as I say, my recollection, and I haven't looked at my analysis. This was the day after this first appeared on the agenda. I went through the two cases and probably half a dozen other cases that applied these criteria, and the courts, it's kind of a, gee, how do I feel? Yep, now I'm going to go apply the criteria. As I say, I think there's a vast predominance of evidence, at least based on what I had at the time of the presentation, both staff and others, that the criteria, with maybe one exception, I forget which one that might be, have been met.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes, Mr. Miller.
So one thing that I took into consideration reading Marcus's verbiage on these was that it seems, while his words often seem to weigh in favor, they seem very hypothetical to me personally. Words like little or no gain. There's a lot of denial may cause this to happen. Denial may force this to happen. And that these things should weigh in favor, and not a word like does or certainly is in favor. Should doesn't seem like a strong advocation to me, and while I can see that the arguments can be made that these things should weigh in favor, I think that there's also fair room to say that, given the uncertainty of what happens going forward, that they may not weigh in the favor, and that approving the zoning for this and going forward may not have any effect in it at all, because if the buyer backs out, then the request was moot in the first place. And because there is so much room, from what I understand, for the buyer to back out, I don't feel confident that voting on these things in order to allow it to happen is a good argument. I don't think you could make that argument just because there are no guarantees in this process. If we already had a buyer that, I know they have to go through due diligence. I know this is a part of it, but, if we were already past that point, if we had commitments, if there was something more than, well, we hope they accept it during due diligence, then I would probably feel differently about it. Given the nature of the uncertainty, I don't think that using these factors, I can support this.
Alderman Jacobson.
I intend to support this. I don't see very much ambiguity about the issue of compliance with the LaSalle criteria. It seems to me very, very clear. But part of this is based on some research I did into nursing home ratings, Champaign County and other nursing homes that are operated by the prospective buyer. And it's interesting, and I guess one of the things I wish that we could have, I wish the prospective buyer who, if everything happens as might happen, we would then be the governmental entity as opposed to you guys who with whom that entity would be dealing. But the question I would have asked is, why are the rankings, the independent rankings of your nursing homes so variable? Because some of them have excellent rankings, and none of them have terrible rankings, but some of them are sort of in the vicinity of our existing nursing home. So, but there's no indication, as far as anything I could find, and I'm sure that you all could find, that these folks are not capable of running a good facility, and it might even be an excellent facility, and that they intend to operate a good facility. So, so I think that all the evidence is that there would be no, there would be no deterioration of the neighborhood. I think all the things that were said about what might happen are based on what county board discussion says they would do or might be forced to do. So I think those are, I don't think that our staff made up the fact that the nursing home might shut down. I think that was what the people who are responsible for those decisions said might very well happen, that they might be forced to take actions that would make that happen. So I mean, I'm glad that we had a thorough discussion. I'm glad we had a thorough presentation. I appreciate the constraints that you put into the RFP. I don't think anybody said yet thank you for that, but I will thank you for that because I think those all were important. So I will support the motion that I made.
Any further? Alderperson Wu.
So I agree. I want to just echo, I think that your presentation was very informative, so thank you very much for putting that together and kind of giving us some broad strokes of what could happen. I think that one of the things that we need to think about is that the first one is a conditional use permit for a skilled care facility nursing home. So it's not to approve or disapprove of the potential buyer. It is simply to say whether or not we agree that this parcel could be used as a skilled care nursing facility by a non-government entity, is my understanding, right? Right now, they have the ability as a government entity to run that. So the question is, should we approve a non-government entity?
Yes, and that conditional use permit was already granted by the ZBA, so they granted that permit.
Okay.
So your charge is to see whether or not you want that zoning that would allow it to utilize that CUP that was already granted by the ZBA.
So the R4?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so if we go to the R4 for a moment, and we go to the LaSalle criteria for number 1, I mean, really, the LaSalle factor, number 1, is the existing land use and zoning of the nearby properties, and the property to the north, I believe, is R4, is that right?
Yeah.
And then surrounding it on the west side is the same one as this one is currently?
Yes, it's the CRE.
Yes, the
And to
CRE.
the south and to the east as well.
So really, that zone would be cut off, it would be more of it would be a straight line down, pretty much.
Yes, it would be expanding that R4
Right,
district southward.
Right. So I'm inclined to support this. I personally think that having a for-profit entity provide health care is probably not in the best interest of the general welfare of the public. However, I am cognizant of the fact that the county has studied this for a very long time, that they're in a very challenging position, and that hard decisions are going to have to be made if they choose to sell this to a for-profit company. And then I think we should all remember that the county voted. This has already gone to referendum. And so those are some of my thoughts on this, and so right now I'm willing to support this.
Alderman Hazen.
Thank you. I believe that competition creates quality, but I think that's irrelevant because our job here was to do zoning. But since 90% of our conversation has been about things other than zoning, I'll throw my comment in. I think competition creates quality. And that is one of the key reasons that I will support it. Thank you.
All right.
Just want to clarify, I think there's some, responding to the comment made by Alderman Miller about the language used in the memo. The planners use that language because they're doing their job. If they had used stronger language as coming to a conclusion that is the city council's job, they wouldn't be doing their job. So for them to say should or may is exactly what they need to be doing as city staff, because it's the city council's job to make the final interpretation. So if they had come in and said it meets this criteria and this criteria and this criteria, then you as a council member would have said, hey, no, that's not your job to do. So that's why they use the language that they do. It doesn't diminish the importance of what they've written. It doesn't diminish, what you need to consider. But it's just Marcus was doing his job.
Okay. So there has been a motion and a second. And this was to move this forward to council for recommendation for approval. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, the ayes have it, and this moves on to council for with recommendation for approval. Ordinance number 2018-02-014, an ordinance approving and denying requests for waivers of subdivision regulations, 500 Art Bartell Road, planning case number 2335-S-118, community development.
Thank you. I'm joined by Mr. Gray. Thank you very much. So, moving into the subdivision waiver request, Art Bartell Road is a private street currently maintained by Champaign County. It first started being built as a separate private accesses to county and school district facilities before 1973. As you can see from this 1973 aerial, you can see where the future Art Bartel Road will become. This is, I'm not sure what the name of the school was back then. It might have been Brookins School. Okay. The stub off of Learman Avenue was into the parking lot, and the stub off of East Main Street came down serving the then nursing home, and I assume this was emergency operations back then. So it started off as a private access, two private access drives to these facilities. And then moving into 2002, as county facilities were added, the Main Street private access drive was extended south. And then sometime when the special use permit was granted in 2004, construction of the nursing home was started, initiating another southward extension. And then finally, prior to 2008, those two private access drives were connected, creating a loop from Learman Avenue to East Main Street. At no time, though, was it considered, as far as I know, that this should become a public street. So it remained a private street during those times, maintained by the county. Given this early construction date, prior to 1973, Art Bartel Road does not meet today's standards for a public street. If this area were being developed today with separate lots, the subdivision regulations would require that the street be built as a public street. Since that is not the case, and since tearing out the street and building an entirely new street is not practical, the county has requested waivers from the subdivision regulations to allow the land to be subdivided into the Champaign County Nursing Home subdivision. As a private street during this time, no sidewalks were constructed on either side of its distance from East Main Street to Learman Avenue, and there are curbs only where it intersects with the parking lot entrances. Here we have now the nursing home with the surrounding uses. It does provide adequate vehicular access for both cars and bicycles, but it does provide deficient access and accessibility for pedestrians due to the lack of sidewalks and few curb cuts. Section 2136A1 of the subdivision code requires that all new streets comply with the minimum standards set forth in the code, including design and construction. Section 2136A2 requires that all buildable lots be adjacent to a public street. Section 2137A requires that sidewalks shall be provided for on both sides of each street in a residential or commercial development. And Section 2138A requires that a developer dedicate the entire right-of-way to the public when they own the land on both sides of a proposed street. All of those conditions are, conditions that are present in the proposed subdivision. The county board has requested waivers for these sections of the code, as the road is already constructed, would be cost prohibitive to tear out and rebuild, and is currently the county's responsibility to maintain, which they would continue. The city engineer determined that for the long-term effectiveness of the city's street network, it is not necessary for the county board to dedicate Art Bartel Road, nor to dedicate the underlying right-of-way, as long as the county maintains the existing road and right-of-way, and the county accepts that continued responsibility. As for the sidewalk waiver request, staff recommends that only a deferral should be granted for the construction of sidewalks along one side of Art Bartel Road for its entire length from East Main Street to Learman Avenue. Additionally, staff recommends that a sidewalk be constructed along the other side of Art Bartel Road as part of the requested Champaign County Nursing Home subdivision. According to Section 21.7 of the Urbana Subdivision and Land Development Code, the petitioner must justify the granting of a waiver from strict compliance with the code by showing that the waiver meets certain criteria. These criteria are identified and discussed now. That there are current first waiver criteria is that there are conditions of topography or other site-specific reasons that make the application of any particular requirement of the Land Development Code unnecessary, or in some cases, perhaps even useless. The level and intensity of the current and future use of the property make some of the code's requirements unnecessary, while the current lack of some infrastructure makes one of the requirements desirable. Enforcement of the road construction standards, including adding curbs and gutters, would require a significant additional expense without providing an additional similar improvement of access to the nursing home. Requiring dedication of the road right-of-way would not be necessary if the street itself remained a private street. However, installation of the required sidewalks would connect to the existing sidewalks along East Main Street and Learman Avenue and improve access to several facilities for residents or users, employees, and visitors. This would result in safer travel from the nearby public transit stops, providing a public benefit that justifies that individual expense. Second, the granting of the requested waiver would not harm other nearby properties. Granting the requested waivers for public street access, construction, and for the dedication of public right-of-way would not harm nearby properties, while granting the fourth waiver of the installation of sidewalks would continue to inhibit access to nearby properties. The street is currently providing adequate access for automotive and bicycle traffic to the property. However, there is currently no provision of infrastructure for pedestrian access to the site. Pedestrians are forced to walk either on the grass or in the street, which is non-conducive to those with a mobility issue. And finally, the third criteria is that the waiver would not negatively impact the public health, safety, and welfare, including the objectives and goals set forth in the comprehensive plan. Granting the street and right-of-way related requested waivers would not negatively impact the public health, safety, and welfare, while granting the sidewalk waiver would continue to provide inadequate infrastructure for pedestrians, contradicting objectives and goals in the comprehensive plan, and negatively impacting public health and welfare. Additionally, the absence of sidewalks increases the likelihood that a resident, user, employee, or visitor will choose to drive rather than walk or take public transit, eliminating the opportunity for improving public health. Installing sidewalks along at least one side of the street would increase access to nearby parks, both for nursing home residents and visitors. These benefits relate directly to the following goals of the comprehensive plan. Goal 5, ensure that land use patterns conserve energy. Goal 9, strengthening Urbana's parks and recreational facilities. And Goal 42, promote accessibility in residential, commercial, and public locations for disabled residents. The findings are summarized in the staff report, and those specific to the subdivision waivers are number 7. Because the street is already constructed as a private street and maintained by the county, the Champaign County Board has submitted waiver requests from certain requirements of the subdivision code. Number 8, the proposed waivers for sections 2136 and 2138 would allow Art Bartel Road to remain a private street on a private easement without negatively impacting current or anticipated levels of automotive or cycling traffic. These waivers would not be harmful to other properties and would not negatively impact the public health, safety, and welfare of the community, nor impede the attainment of goals and objectives contained in the comprehensive plan. Staff supports the proposed waiver with the condition that any further subdivision of the parent or subject parcel would trigger the upgrade of the road to public street standards and the dedication of public right-of-way. And number 9, the proposed waiver for section 2137 would allow the continued lack of sidewalks on both sides of Art Bartel Road and the associated lack of public infrastructure for pedestrian traffic to the nursing home and other campus facilities. Staff supports only a deferral of the requirement to install sidewalks on both sides of Art Bartel Road from East Main Street to Learman Avenue within 2 years of the recording of the plat, with future sidewalk construction triggered by any future requests to subdivide the parent or the subject parcel. The options in this case for the ordinance approving waivers of subdivision ordinance requirements at the proposed Champaign County Nursing Home are as follows. Approve the proposed ordinance as presented with a 2/3 vote. approve the proposed ordinance as modified by any specific suggested changes with a 2/3 vote, or do not approve the proposed ordinance. At its February 22nd, 2018 meeting, the Urbana Plan Commission voted 6 ayes to 0 nays to recommend to City Council for approval of the requested waivers from Section 2136 and from Section 2138 with the following condition. At the time of any future request for a subdivision of the parent or subject parcel, the owner must reconstruct Art Bartel Road to the public street standard in effect at the time of that future subdivision and dedicate the public right-of-way, and denial of the waiver of Section 2137, which requires sidewalk installation, but support for a deferral of sidewalk along one side of Art Bartel Road with a condition that sidewalk along one side of the street be constructed in the short term. The other side would be constructed if there is additional subdivision of the parcel. Staff concurs with this recommendation of the Plan Commission and offers specific condition language in the ordinance to set the deadline for sidewalk construction on the one side of the street to 2 years from the time the subdivision plat is recorded.
Thank you, Marcus. Very thorough. Appreciate both of your presentations, man. Mr. Gray, did you have something to add?
No, I don't.
Mr. Miller?
Marcus, I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. By passing this ordinance, we would be approving the requested waivers for Section 2136 and 2138A and denying 2137A with the conditions listed for both. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, the request for a waiver would mean that they would not ever have to construct sidewalks. So staff are supporting only a deferral of one side until such time as any subdivision, future subdivision happens, but require a sidewalk on one side right now. So that there would be a sidewalk along one side of the Art Bartel Road.
And can you just talk a little bit more about the Champaign County Nursing Home subdivision?
Yes.
So it's, I just don't understand what that exactly means.
So in order to be able to sell the property, the county board would need to split off that property that the nursing home is currently on. Right now, it, like all of the other Champaign facilities, our Champaign County facilities, are on one single 63.5 acre parcel. So in order to sell it, they need to split out that land. That subdivision request will be handled by the Administrative Review Committee because it would be considered a minor development, as there are no additional public infrastructures being required to that facility because everything's already there. So that Champaign County Nursing Home subdivision is the fourth of the 4 requests that were submitted.
Okay, but they're not planning on subdividing it and turning it into anything else. This is basically a renaming, a recategorizing, if you will.
They would subdivide out the parcel
From everything else.
from everything else.
But not within the parcel.
No, we're correct, right. It's only that parcel that the nursing home is on.
And this ordinance only refers and reflects what happens within the parcel that is going to be taken out from the rest of the county parcel, correct? Not the entire parcel itself, just the part that's being
Yeah, and just to be
taken out.
clear, we're creating a separate lot within this parcel. And
Right.
why this is so unusual is that any lot created in the city that's developed is adjacent to a public street. In this case, we're creating a lot that is not adjacent to a public street, but it's adjacent to what's called Art Bartel Road.
Right.
What is embedded in this subdivision plat is perpetual ingress, egress easements. So in a sense, to the public, to a driver, Art Bartel Road looks like any other public street, if you will, but it's not.
I've driven down it.
Excuse me?
I said I've driven down it, yeah.
Yeah.
except it doesn't have curbs, it doesn't have sidewalks.
Correct. So what's unique is we're creating a lot, not adjacent to a public dedicated right-of-way, but it's going to be adjacent to essentially a perpetual ingress, egress easement. That's what's unusual.
Gotcha. So does this affect what happens to the entirety of Art Bartel Road, even though
No.
it's...
The road stays essentially as is, except for
The
the
sidewalk.
2-year window of installing, designing, locating, planning, and installing a sidewalk.
But if they should subdivide this plot, the one that's on the screen, then that would trigger the requirement of Art Bartel having to be redone as a
Additional,
public
that's
road.
correct. If there's a request to create a lot to sell the Humane Society or the Brookins admin building or anything else, then would trigger a full-blown public right-of-way creation, which would include, an investment well over $1 million.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that sorry, Marcus. go.
The nursing home subdivision would not trigger that requirement.
It's the larger...
Additional, so if
it's
somebody wanted to split out
Yeah.
the Humane Society, that would be a subsequent, and that would trigger, hey, you have to rebuild the road.
Okay. So that has to do with the larger plot, not
Right. Correct.
the nursing home plot that's being taken out.
Correct.
Okay.
But they would have to, if the staff recommendation was followed, they would put in a sidewalk on one side of the road within a short period of time.
Okay, thank you.
So to make sure that I'm clear on this, so the road, Art Bartel Road, why could we have it there, the county nursing home? And is it because it's a public entity and this is a private entity? I'm trying to see how this sale is associated with this street, and I don't quite understand that.
The sale is associated with the street because to create a lot, you have to be adjacent, contiguous to a public street. In this case, it's not. And this is the exception, is that our Bartel
But is
Road
that
is a
for-
private road, will remain a private road, but we are creating a lot that will be contiguous to an easement, which provides access to Maine or to Nerman.
Right, and I guess I'm trying to get a clarity that would allow me to say that in a language that the person watching at home could actually understand.
Okay.
So what, the building, the county
To create a
nursing-
lot, you have to follow our subdivision regulations, and it's a book of 100 pages. And embedded in there, it talks about how to, build roads and curb and gutter and sidewalks, et cetera.
Right.
And in order to avoid large expense, capital expense, the county has requested this waiver, if you will, of dedicating public right-of-way and building the street to a public standard to keep the street as is. The county is also committing that they will continue to own and maintain and repair that street. The city will not have that responsibility. So with those conditions, essentially, we are recommending this one-lot subdivision.
All right, so basically, the sale of the nursing home would typically require this developer or the buyer to develop Art Bartel.
True.
Right.
Yeah, if
And
this
so
was
we're
raw
giving them
land,
a
that's
million-something
true.
dollar waiver along with the sale, is what you're ultimately saying, right?
Yeah, keep in mind that this lot is only one portion of frontage to Art Bartel Road. It wouldn't be the sole entity to pay for an upgraded road. But yes, there is an avoidance of some capital improvements for a new road meeting our current subdivision standards.
So the county is going to continue to plow it, take care of it, and all that type of stuff, although it's really the responsibility of the person or the entity that's buying the nursing home.
No, that's not true.
So it wouldn't, okay. They would
No.
be required to upgrade it typically, but they wouldn't be responsible for plowing it and all that type of stuff as well?
Correct.
Okay. But they do get to avoid the upgrades that would typically take place in that situation, unless they do something else or unless the county does something else different with the other properties
Yes.
on that acreage.
Correct.
Right? But the particular developer, the buyer, will avoid that particular cost regardless. But because if they do something in the subdivision that they're buying, a nursing home, from what I heard you just say, they're never going to have to worry about our Bartell Road. Is that correct?
I would say, to my knowledge, that is correct.
Okay. I'm
not aware of any other agreement within the arrangement between the two parties, so I would say that's probably true.
Okay.
Well-
Alderman Jacobson.
Well, the buyer is buying, if this goes through, is buying the nursing home, not buying the street or the road.
Correct.
I mean, typically, when you buy a piece of property, you don't buy also the public street or road adjacent to it.
Well, I would disagree with that comment.
Oh, okay, okay.
No, you are
Educate me.
paying, no, when someone buys raw land, farmland, and you're going to subdivide it and build streets and sewers and sidewalks, when you buy that lot, you're paying for the infrastructure costs of that subdivision.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'll give you an example. Why aren't there lights in my subdivision? Well, when that subdivision was built, lighting wasn't required, and the lot that you purchased didn't have that as the case. So, no, when you pay the lot, when you buy a lot in Stone Creek or Behringer, you're paying for the roads, the streets, the sidewalks, the sewer. That's how the developer gets reimbursed for their capital investment into that infrastructure.
Okay, so in principle, there could have been a different deal, and the buyer of the nursing home might have acquired responsibility for upgrading
Possibly,
the street.
yeah. If there was an upgrade, there could have been
Yeah,
some
okay.
proportion paid that way, but in this case, it's fine what's going on.
Yeah.
It's a private street, it will remain a private street. In essence, the county will maintain the half of the street frontage across the
Yeah.
nursing home. Maybe they're not recapturing some dollars there, but that's fine. I mean, what's going on will work just fine.
And I will clarify that the conditional use permit allows the continued current level of services, scale, and intensity. So there is no expectation that vehicular traffic would increase. So the current condition of the road should continue to meet vehicular traffic needs.
But the maintenance of that road would still be the responsibility of the county residents, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And if it was upgraded, we know streets last longer when they get upgraded, right? So if this buyer was asked to pay for that upgrade, as they would typically be asked to do when purchasing such a property adjacent to the public right-of-way, then that would indeed save taxpayers money over the long run, because although the traffic may not increase, the wear and tear on the road will, and ultimately the county taxpayers will have to pay for that, as opposed to this developer who would typically have to pay for it under normal circumstances. So, thank you. Bill, did you have something?
Yeah, last time I brought up the question of the type of sidewalk that would be built, because this area is in several of our pedestrian plans. It's in the bicycle master plan, and part of that was a green loop that went right along the east-west part of Bartell Road there, clear over to Weaver Park. And part of that looked like it would be a Park District loop in the park just to the south there. But then the other part would be right along our Bartell Road. And although that part wasn't in the Greenways and Trails plan that I thought it was, it is in our bicycle master plan. So I was wondering if there would be some way that we could encourage collaboration between the Park District and the city and the county to make that a full width pedestrian multi-use path.
All I can say at this point is the city and the Park District have not discussed this at all. Historically, the additional width of a path or a sidewalk is generally the city responsibility, or in this case, since it's a park, Park District maybe would pay for that, but there's been no discussion with them on it. This is a medium or longer term goal for a pathway system in the city. I know that there are, personally speaking, much higher priority locations than this location, but we've not discussed this with the county or with the Park District. But you are correct. This has been identified as an east-west connection point between Lehrman and Weaver Park. And as we know, Weaver Park isn't even developed at this time, so there's not much prioritization or hurry, if you will, to do this project because Weaver Park isn't even developed. So
Right.
if Weaver Park was developed, then there'd be more pressure or higher priority. So I don't think it would be a wise expenditure of funds to do this particular system when we have others that are a higher ranking.
Okay, I guess I'm just looking from an efficiency point of view, how much extra it costs to make an 8-foot wide path rather than a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and you know, trying to not try to have to do it again in 10 years when we're ready, because Weaver Park's been developed and now there's a connection that goes clear over to Scottswood, and maybe by that time Scottswood is part of the city, and you know, it's part of the Green Loop plan, so just wanted to bring it up.
Here's my cursor. I mean, if you did anything, it would be only to this point. It would not be in this area at all. So whether we have a 5-foot sidewalk here for peds, possibly bicyclists, or an 8-foot, 8 or 10-foot for that matter, I don't think it'd be a wise expenditure of money at this juncture.
Yes, Mary Alice.
Marcus, can you pull up the parcel that you had, the previous one? Oh, bigger, so if you were looking at, oh, yes, thank
Yes.
you. Exhibit E, I should have written that down. So if I'm looking at this, basically the subdivision is the red dotted line that goes around this. This is the subdivision. So if that's the case, if we don't approve the road, the subdivision requirements, it would only be that piece of that red dotted line along that road. So I think that's 576 feet. Is that correct? That's how I'm reading it?
Yes.
So if we didn't approve it, they would be required, they being the county, I assume, to upgrade that to current road standards, but nothing north of that, nothing north of that red dotted line would have a requirement to upgrade it to current road standards. So you would have this kind of, I'm going to call it a farm road. It's not a farm road, but you know what I mean. It's this, and then at the end you have this really kind of fancy is that right?
I will defer that to the city engineer because I'm not sure how we would address a portion in the middle of a larger span.
True, but it would be a complicated design, to say the least, because you've got ditches, you would be installing storm sewers and curb and gutter and sidewalks. It wouldn't function real well. You really have to do it all or not, and quite frankly, if you're going to subdivide, and this is the first lot subdivision of more lots, if you will, you know, generally, I'll call it, you'd have like a preliminary
Sure.
plat that might show multiple lots, and you could draw imaginary lines around all the buildings and facilities out there, and you come up with maybe 6, 8 lots. Technically, you're going to build the entire street. We're not going to approve, to get either from Learman to there or Maine to here, you have to at least have a bona fide public street, not just a half of a street for 560 feet. So we usually don't do subdivisions and require street improvements that way. Otherwise, it'd just be a hodgepodge.
So my second thing, my second point here is to speak to Councilmember Amon's comment about the amount of money that would be, I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth as he walks in, gifted to another place. The RFP didn't include it, right? So the RFP, I assume, did not say that they would need to pay for this type of road upgrade, and therefore, if it's not approved, it would definitely be on the county because you can't go backwards and change the RFP. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? Okay. So, I mean, it's a done deal under the current RFP, put it that way. All right. Okay. You missed my whole comment, Aaron.
I got the gist of it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Are you relinquishing the chair?
I'm relinquishing the chair.
All right, thank you. Are there any further comments? Any questions? Is there a motion?
Wait, I think the applicant wanted to address. Just want to make sure.
I'll move to send ordinance number 2018-02-014 to City Council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Alderman Brown, second by Alderman Hazen. Any further discussion? Ms. Busey.
Our only other comment was really to request your approval of the staff recommendations as they have been presented to you with regard to this subdivision.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Alderperson Wu.
I just want to confirm based on that. So what we are, is that text? And I apologize, this
Yeah,
was
it's in the
missing in my
ordinance.
packet. It is in here with the sidewalk and the, okay, thank you.
All right, so no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, ayes have it. I do have the public input cards. I wanted to make sure that Dr. Underwood, Eldridge card, you know that these cards will be submitted to the public record. Okay, so I can read them into the public record. Yes, yes, ma'am, not a problem. From Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, she chooses not to address the members, but asks that her position be entered into the record as that they are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. Eldridge Melinda Carr also wishes to make note or to have read into a record her continued concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues, equity, and historic impact, and she chooses not to address the members at this time. I do want to announce that the issue that has been brewing for quite some time is the vehicle for hire issue, and there will be a joint public meeting between the City of Champaign and Urbana here in these chambers this Thursday, the 17th, from 10 to 11 a.m., and this is going to be very important to have this discussion. It was held up for a while to get further clarity about the look-back period for people with felony convictions and their ability to gain these licenses. So vehicle for hire licenses up for discussion this Thursday, 10 to 11 a.m., right here in these city council chambers. Those of you who are affected, those of you who are concerned and want to weigh in, you're invited to come and participate. No further business before this body. This meeting is adjourned.